Chapter 1833. Boss, are you familiar with the people here? Portia asked. Of course. My house is here. Of course I'm familiar. Portia realized that people would greet Chen Zhao wherever he went. It seemed that Chen Zhao really knew a lot of people. A few people sat by the flower bed across the street. They were the gangsters of Mountain Town. One of the women had a lollipop in her mouth. She looked across the street. Who's that Asian? I've never seen him in Mountain Town. He's rich. He lives by Mirror Lake. The typhoon flattened his house, and it's being rebuilt. He's living somewhere else for now, one of the gangsters said. Dash and beer is his business. Hundreds of families in the whole town have more money than him. So rich. The woman's eyes brightened. Asians should be easy to bully. We just need to scare him a little, and we can extort a lot of money from him. Please don't. He's not a normal person. No one in Mountain Town dares to offend him. One of the gangsters hurriedly stopped her. Why? He's not a big deal other than being rich. You've only been here for a few months. You don't know how scary he is. Last time, a guy went to him, and he beat him up and sent him to the ICU. Can't we just have a few more people? The woman's eyes flashed with ferocity. If we get a few more people, Mountain Town will be our territory in the future. If we throw a few Molotov cocktails at his house, I don't believe that he won't compromise. Guriel, do you want to die? The gangster glanced at the woman. I already said that we can't offend that guy. If you do, I'll back out now. Coward. Guriel's expression darkened. She was displeased that someone had humiliated her in front of everyone. I'll back out too. Me too. I don't want to go against Chen Zhao. Not every gangster in Mountain Town had interacted with Chen Zhao before, but they all knew what Chen Zhao was capable of. There were people who didn't believe him in the past 2 years, but they were all tortured to death in the end. A few people were still missing. A year ago, a gang came to Mountain Town. Dozens of people came to Mountain Town and stayed there for 2 days. Then, he heard that Mountain Town's rich man was Chen Zhao, so he brought a few people to find him. That night, the dozens of people disappeared. There was no evidence that Chen Zhao had done it. However, the residents of Mountain Town all thought that it was Chen Zhao who did it. In the blink of an eye, Yunel realized that the hoodlums she had recruited with great difficulty actually had the same attitude on this matter. Unlike the other thugs, Nur had done everything. He had been an assassin for a gang, a mercenary, an informant for the police, and a bounty hunter. Yunel was strong, brave, and ruthless. Seeing Chen Zhao's figure, Gurnier was even more displeased. If he could get rid of that Asian, then he would have the final say in Mountain Town. With that thought in mind, Gurnier strengthened his determination. Portia, take the kids to the car. Chen Zhao suddenly stopped and said, Take them home now. Boss, what are you doing? I suddenly remembered that I have something to do, Chen Zhao said. What is it? Why are you asking so many questions? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes at Portia. Uncle, do you need me to stay and help? Didira asked. Among all the people, only Didira knew what was going on. Chen Zhao patted Didira's head. No need. Go. Portia had a strange expression. What was Chen Zhao going to do? Didira actually asked if Chen Zhao needed her help. This family was full of strange things. Portia sent the group of children to the MPV and drove away. Didira, what's your uncle going to do? Nothing. Didira lowered her head and sank into her own world again. Xianli was also curious, but she didn't ask now. Xianli knew about Didira's specialness. Didira wasn't a witch, but she had a special bloodline. She had the legendary clairvoyance in clairvoyance. If visibility allowed, she could see a bug thousands of meters away. As long as the environment was quiet, she could hear murmurs thousands of meters away. Didira, do you need help? Xianli asked. Not really, Didira said. Didira had asked Chen Zhao if he needed help. She just pitied the woman called Gyur. That woman called Nur had obviously picked the wrong target. Suddenly, Gyur realized that Chen Zhao, whom she'd followed all the way, had suddenly separated from his kids and turned toward her. With a smile on his face, Chen Zhao stood before Gyur. Gyur's heart skipped a beat. She had a bad feeling. Gyur looked around carefully. There were no passers-by. There were no cameras here either. Gyur's plan was to attack in a more secluded place. But this place was fine too. Gyur looked at Chen Zhao. I heard you're very rich. I want to get to know you. Chen Zhao rubbed his nose. I don't plan on getting to know a scumbag. Gyur suddenly took out a dagger and charged at Chen Zhao. Gyur wanted to use Chen Zhao to establish her dominance. She wasn't afraid of killing people on the street. There were no passers-by here anyway. Plus, her experience in the past taught her how to get rid of all the evidence. Chen Zhao's right leg flashed, and then he pulled it back. Gyur felt her vision blur, and then she was sent flying. Gyur spat out a mouthful of blood. She felt like all the bones in her body were broken. Gurnier endured the intense pain and panted heavily, gradually suppressing the pain in his body. Then she stood up again. Chen Zhao was surprised that the woman could still stand up after being kicked by him. Gyur touched her chest. 2 of her ribs were broken. This injury wasn't easy to recover from. It wasn't that Gyur hadn't met opponents stronger than her, but she could stand to the end every time. Other people didn't know, but no matter how serious her injuries were, Gyur could recover quickly. She could also use her willpower to suppress the pain from her injuries. Chen Zhao also realized that Gyur didn't look like she was injured. His kick hadn't been merciful. Apart from not killing her, it could basically make her wheelchair for the rest of her life. But not only did Gyur stand up again, she didn't seem injured at all. In fact, her aura was even stronger than before. A spiritualist? She didn't seem to realize her identity. Chen Zhao wanted to see how much she could do. You seem to know how to take a beating. Chapter 1834. Gyunol charged at him again. In the end, Chen Zhao still kicked her away. Gyunol rolled on the ground in pain. This time, Chen Zhao used more strength in his attack. If she was a normal person, Chen Zhao's kick would definitely make her never walk again. But after rolling on the ground for a while, Gyunol actually recovered. Gradually, Gyunol stood up. She was covered in sweat, but the pain on her face was lessening. Chen Zhao tilted his head and looked at Gyunol. Gyunol panted heavily, and her aura grew stronger. As if venting, she punched the wall beside her. There was actually a fist mark on the concrete. This wasn't something a normal person could do. Gyunol gritted her teeth and looked at Chen Zhao. I'm going to kill you. Standing where he was, Chen Zhao crooked his finger. Come. Gyunol roared angrily and charged at Chen Zhao again, punching at him. Chen Zhao also raised his arm and punched back. Crack. Gyunol's entire arm was crippled. Gyunol took 2 steps back and touched her weak right arm. Chen Zhao had broken all the bones in her arm. The pain was indescribable. But in just a dozen seconds, Gyunol's injury healed again. Chen Zhao still had a confused expression. Wasn't the speed of her recovery a little too fast? Her recovery speed was almost the same as his, right? Also, every time she was injured, she would become stronger. Where did this power come from? You can't kill me. Gyunol grinned at Chen Zhao. Then I'll kill you. Nur's forte was bravery and ruthlessness. She could also turn from weak to strong every time. Because she could always drag it out until she was exhausted, she would become stronger and stronger. Smiling, Chen Zhao stood there and looked at Gyunol. Looking at Chen Zhao's face, Gyunol hated him even more. She charged at Chen Zhao again. But her spine was naturally broken by Chen Zhao's kick. This was almost a fatal injury. But Gyunol stood up again. This time, her recovery speed was slower. But Chen Zhao realized another problem. Although Nur seemed to be stronger than before, but her face was getting paler and paler. It seemed like her recovery speed was beyond common sense. There was also a limit to his inexplicably powerful strength. Tell me, Chen Zhao asked. What's with this weird ability of yours? Gurnier's breathing became more and more rapid. She had never met an enemy like Chen Zhao. The tactics she'd used in the past to drag her enemies to death seemed to be completely useless against him. No matter how much stronger she was, Chen Zhao could still heavily injure her with one kick. Gurnier was initially full of confidence, but now he was starting to regret his recklessness. In the beginning, she dared to make a move on the street, because she felt that no one could stop her. Even if the matter was exposed, the most he could do was run away. However, Chen Zhao was much more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. And Gyunol knew his own family well. She did not understand how this ability came about. She could gain strength through pain. The greater the pain one endured, the greater the power and regenerative ability one would obtain. She called this power the power of pain. She had never told anyone about this. She was afraid of being caught and used as a guinea pig. However, this ability was not without its limits. The power of pain had a threshold. Once it exceeded the threshold, the power would collapse and the body would suffer unimaginable pain. Gunnir started to become nervous, impatient and angry. After this, she would definitely kill his entire family. Gunnir picked up the dagger on the ground. This time she charged forward again. This time, Chen Zhao did not move. He did not even block. Gunnir's dagger stabbed into Chen Zhao's stomach. Gunnir was overjoyed. Success! But the next moment, she realized that something was wrong. She did not feel like she had stabbed into flesh. Chen Zhao did not dodge or block. He actually wanted to know how strong Gunnir was. Gunnir looked up and saw Chen Zhao looking down at her. Chen Zhao still had a smile on his face. Gunnir stabbed again. The result was the same. Gunnir's dagger was probably as strong as an automatic rifle. Chen Zhao reached out and pinched Gunnir's mouth. Gunnir wanted to open her mouth to bite Chen Zhao's palm. Unfortunately, she could not open her mouth at all. Chen Zhao glanced around. Gunnir's heart pounded. Chen Zhao's action was exactly the same as what she had done in the past when she committed crimes. Chen Zhao dragged Gunnir into the alley. Gunnir struggled with all her might, but she could not resist at all. Chen Zhao tossed Gunnir onto the ground and stepped on her palm. Ah! Chen Zhao squatted down before Gunnir, holding up Gunnir's crushed hand. As expected, Gunnir's palm started recovering. Gunnir raised her left arm and smashed it at Chen Zhao's head. Chen Zhao did not give her a chance to attack at all. He grabbed the incoming fist and squeezed hard. Gunnir screamed again. Gunnir screamed again. However, it didn't take long for Gunnil's fist to recover. Very strong recovery, Chen Zhao said, rubbing his chin. Gunnir was in extreme pain now. She regretted it. She really regretted it. She really could not offend this guy. He was a demon. I wonder if I can recover if I remove the entire arm. Chen Zhao grabbed Gunnir's arm and was about to use force. Thinking about it, he felt that it was risky. Forget it, Chen Zhao muttered to himself. I'll just remove one finger first. Ah! Gunnir screamed again. Chen Zhao removed the middle finger from Gunnir's right hand. But this time, Gunnir's finger did not grow back. Chen Zhao tried a few more times. As long as he did not remove all her limbs from her body could recover. Of course, the recovery speed varied. Chen Zhao stood up. He found Gunnir interesting. Klaus, come to Mountain Town with the helicopter. I caught an interesting lab rat. Hearing the word lab rat, Gunnir trembled uncontrollably in fear. A sinister smile appeared on Chen Zhao's face. Are you scared of being cut up for research? Just as you thought, you will be sliced into pieces. Your blood, your skin, and your brain will all be stripped away. Gunnir struggled to escape, but Chen Zhao pressed her to the ground with one hand. She was terrified. She did not think that she would walk right into a trap and run to Chen Zhao. She wanted to use Chen Zhao to establish her dominance. In the end, she was captured by Chen Zhao as a lab rat. Right now, Gunnir wanted to cry. Chapter 1835. Gunnil was in the underworld. It wasn't that she hadn't seen evil people before. She'd even killed a few gang bosses. But now she really regretted it. This man was even more evil than her. A few people from the association came. They were all curious. Who in LA dared to offend Chen Zhao? But they regretted it after seeing it. Gunnil wasn't strong. Plus, she'd been tortured so badly by Chen Zhao. The helicopter landed at the HQ, and Gunnil was dragged down. Gunnil was in intense pain all over. The side effects of that ability had already appeared. The power of pain was spreading throughout her body. Gunnil was tough, and didn't make a sound. A few people from the HQ came over. They wanted to see who Chen Zhao had brought back. Gunnil suddenly jumped up and pounced at a girl beside her. Seeing Gunnil pounce, Lisa pushed. A surge of energy burst forth from her palm. Gunnil was sent flying. Gunnil was dumbfounded. She didn't understand what had happened at all. How could a girl be so scary? Chen Zhao smiled but didn't say anything. Even if he could have stopped it just now. Even if he could have stopped her, he didn't. Apart from Aduz, everyone here could beat Gunnil up. Even if it was Aduz, He still had a bunch of ferocious evil spirit followers. Chen Zhao smiled at Ginel. Stand up. Don't play dead. Ginel stood up slowly. Ginel's eyes flashed. She seemed to want to fight one last time. The people around him looked at Neil with mocking eyes. Ginel felt extremely embarrassed. What exactly do you want? You mess with me first, Chen Zhao said calmly. Ginel looked left and right. Everyone was watching the show. Everyone was watching her make a fool of herself. You're breaking the law, Ginel said after a long while. Everyone roared with laughter. Ginel was embarrassed too. In the past, it was her enemies who said this to her. But today she was forced to say such words. If Chen Zhao cared, he probably wouldn't have kidnapped her here. Everyone here clearly didn't care about worldly laws. Even the girl who'd sent her flying had a sneer on her face. Just then Ruan Faxben walked out. Yo, President, where did you find such an ancient clan? Primordial clan? What ancient family? Chen Zhao asked, confused. To put it bluntly, he's a person of ancient bloodline, Ruan Faxben said. The most direct way to tell is his green pupils. Everyone looked at Neil's eyes. Sure enough, her eyes were green. The primordial clan originated in ancient Egypt. They were actually a branch of humans. But because they were stronger than ordinary people, they threatened the position of the rulers. In the end, they were slaughtered by ordinary humans. However, among ordinary people, there would occasionally be one or two people with atavism, Ruan Faxben said. This was the first time Neil had heard of it. The origin of his special ability. So he's special? Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes at Nur. Compared to ordinary people, of course it's special. Ruan Faxben said. But to us, they're just SOO. The primordial clan is our kind. They're not much stronger than us. Their strongest ability is to suppress pain and turn pain into power. In ancient Egypt, they formed a powerful undead army. But they don't have true immortality. They'll still die from fatal injuries. Neil understood. These weren't ordinary people either. President, give her to me, Ruan Faxben said. You like this type? Ha. I just want to use her for an experiment. After all, the primordial clan is rare. Gurnier shuddered. He looked at Ruan Faxben's messy hair, face full of stubble, and clothes that were also messy and stained. He looked like one of those perverted scientists in movies and TV dramas. Coincidentally, I want to do an experiment, Chen Zhao said. Give me a copy of the data when it's out. No, I don't want to be a lab rat. I'll agree to whatever you want me to do. I'll be your subordinate. Don't make me an experiment subject. Neil begged. Sorry, I don't need it. Chen Zhao looked at Neil with a smile. Neil pounced at Chen Zhao. She wanted to fight with all her might. But the next moment, a black chain drilled out of the ground and wrapped around Neil. Ruan Faxi pointed with his finger, and Neil was pulled to the ground. Little rat, don't mess around. Chen Zhao was surprised. One of the 4 pillar kings of the Roma had used this spell last time too. It seemed to be called Hell's Chain. But that wasn't strange. Ruan Faxi knew a lot of random spells. Just then Portia called. Hey Portia, what's up? Ms. Alex said that she needs you to go over and sign the contract. The sooner the better. Okay, I got it. Chen Zhao hung up. Glancing at the dragged Neil, he turned to leave. Ruan Faxben held the other end of the chain. Neil was completely restrained and couldn't use any strength. Do you know a Fumin? Ruan Faxben asked. Gurnier's footsteps paused, and his expression changed. Where did you hear that name? So you do. Is she okay now? Ruan Faxben's tone was indifferent, but there was also some nostalgia in his tone. Who are you? Neil asked. But at the next moment, Gurnier suddenly felt the chains on his body tighten, and his feet seemed to break free from gravity as he floated up. Holding the chain, Ruan Faxben said indifferently, Keep your voice down. Who exactly are you? Who I am is none of your business. Is a Fumin in Los Angeles? She disappeared. She disappeared 10 years ago. Disappeared. Ruan Faxben narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Neil. How did she disappear? Missing is missing. How would I know how she went missing? You'd better keep your arrogance and rudeness to yourself. Anyone here can kill you. Ruan Faxben's tone was rather cold. Just then, the door beside the corridor opened. Ginel saw a girl in black walk out of the door. Looking through the crack in the door, he saw a few skulls in the room. Helis glanced at Gunil indifferently, and then at Ruan Faxaben. You're disturbing me. I'm sorry, Helith. Ruan Faxi was a little respectful towards Helith at first. Helis's gaze fell on Neil. Very good material. Ruan, how about giving her to me? Sorry, she's the president's trophy. He asked me to experiment on her. Chapter 1836. When Gunil faced Helith, he felt a chill down his spine. The girl looked young, but there was a hair-raising, awe-inspiring aura between her brows. Helith had a pitiful expression and licked her lips. What a pity. If only I could turn her into a specimen. You know the ancient family too? Yes, I've met one before, Helith said. Huh. There are very few ancient families now. Where did you meet one? Wydak. Where? How come I've never heard of it? An island in the Atlantic Ocean, Helith said. With that, she turned to leave. After a few steps, she looked back at Gunil. Ruan, can you give her to me after you've finished your research? Gunil's expression was unnatural. Specimen? The girl said she wanted to turn her into a specimen? Go talk to the president. Ruan Faxaben left with Gunil. Gunil was terrified. She was brought into a lab. Then the chains on her body were loosened. Don't think about escaping. No one can escape from here, Ruan Faxaben said. Plus, you've offended the president. Gunil didn't care. So what if she did? At most she would die. Of course, it would be best if she didn't die. When did Alman go missing? Ruan Faxaben asked again. What's your relationship with Afuman? Afuman used to be my student, Ruan Faxaben said. Ruan Faxaben said. But she left my side 25 years ago, and then there was no trace of her. If I hadn't met you today, I would have almost forgotten that I had such a student. Ruan Faxaben looked at Afuman. You're her daughter? Gunil didn't speak. Ruan Faxaben waved his hand. Draw some blood. Gunil stared at Ruan with a dark expression. You think I'll cooperate? You should. After all, you can stay alive for Afuman's sake. But if the president does it himself, you might be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Ruan Faxaben glanced at the missing finger on Gunil's right hand. Thinking of Chen Zhao, Gunil was shocked. In the end, he picked up the syringe and drew some blood. And some of your skin and flesh. Gunnier was furious, but he could only compromise in the end. When did Avelman go missing? 10 years ago. Gunil watched as Ruan Faxaben conducted an experiment that she couldn't understand while talking to her. You weren't an adult then, right? Ruan Faxi asked casually. Gunil's face gradually turned cold. She obviously didn't want to talk more about Afuman. After all, because of her mother's disappearance, she had no one to rely on when she was underage. Her current personality, to a large extent, was formed during those years. In the United States, the government sold everything, including land, islands, and oceans. Of course, it was the same for every country. When Chen Zhao arrived at Alex's law firm, he realized that Alex had called the people from the Land and Resources Bureau over. The Land and Resources Bureau sent a small team of 4 people and a lawyer. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to sell. In fact, Alex and her team had already negotiated the price for Chen Zhao. The people from the Bureau of Land and Resources didn't care why Chen Zhao was buying an ocean. Even though Chen Zhao said it was for breeding. But they wouldn't believe him. Anyway, they wouldn't care. But then again, since Chen Zhao was willing to buy 100 square kilometers of ocean, he might be willing to buy even larger ones. The rules of the Bureau of Land and Resources for selling the ocean were that it couldn't be a sea route or the habitat of a single species, especially an endangered species. It couldn't be polluting. If a ship, person, or plane crashed in the ocean, the rescuers or teams had the right to enter the area. Anyway, there were a lot of messy conditions. When these people saw Chen Zhao, they started to brag about the huge economic value of the sea. To them, it wasn't easy to meet an idiot, especially one who had money but nowhere to spend it. So they really hoped that the idiot would buy more. The sea area of the United States was so large, and most of the sea areas, except for a small number of coastal fisheries, were basically empty and had no economic value. So if someone was willing to buy, they were obviously willing to sell. Unfortunately, Chen Zhao didn't need such a large area at all. After all, Nanchi Island was only so big. It was at most 10 square kilometers. If the island was to be reclaimed and expanded in the future, it would at most be 20 or 30 square kilometers. It wouldn't be any bigger. Zhao didn't need such a large area. Buying an extra inch would be a waste. Zhao was already willing to buy 100 square kilometers. Actually, 50 square kilometers was enough. So, Zhao wouldn't buy a single cent more. The people from the Bureau of Land and Resources were helpless. They couldn't persuade Zhao. Right now, it wasn't a seller's market, but a buyer's market. If Zhao didn't buy it, they would be in big trouble. Originally, Alex had expected to buy the ocean for 5 million, but in the end, she forcefully lowered it to 2 million. Of course, she would get a cut of the money she saved. Alex kept asking Zhao about it. Why did he want to buy the ocean? But Zhao still wouldn't tell her. Alex was very helpless. She didn't believe that Zhao really had too much money and nowhere to spend it. But she still didn't understand the value of the ocean. Was there some natural mineral deposit in the ocean? Even if there was, Zhao couldn't touch the mineral deposit. That wasn't something Zhao could do. Even if the ocean belonged to Zhao, he couldn't do this business. The mineral deposit business had long been controlled by the various giants. Even the richest man in the world would be beaten up if he got involved in the mineral deposit or energy industry. Not to mention Zhao. Every industry had its own rules. For example, in the beer industry, Dashen Beer was now a local giant. If a new person entered the picture, Zhao would also attack. Just like how Dashen Beer had been attacked in the past. But the beer industry was relatively mild. Most of the time, it wouldn't use extreme competition. The energy and mineral industries, on the other hand, were pretty much a bloodbath. Just look at the massacres caused by the big companies in Africa and South America. They even started wars. For example, the YLK War. To put it simply, it was a war of energy. Chapter 1837. As soon as Zhao walked out of Alex's law firm, 2 bodyguards in black approached him. Mr. Chen, we were sent by Ali Rodriguez Alexander. She hasn't been feeling well recently. We hope you can take a look at her. With that, one of the bodyguards handed Zhao a check. Sure. Zhao looked at the number on the check and agreed without hesitation. Zhao was indeed very rich now. But capitalists were greedy and insatiable. Ali Rodriguez Alexander gave him a price he couldn't refuse. Zhao went to Ali Rodriguez Alexander's luxurious manor without hesitation. Rydra returned to Ali Rodriguez Alexander's side. The last time Zhao saw her, she was still in prison. Ali Rodriguez Alexander was sitting on the same chair as when they first met. Rydra nodded slightly at Zhao. It was a greeting to Zhao. Mr. Chen, hello. We meet again. Hello, Ms. Alexander. Zhao sat beside Ali Rodriguez Alexander. Are you feeling unwell this time? The last time I woke up after being in a coma for 3 days, I felt that I couldn't sleep. Recently, I needed about 48 hours to fall asleep, and the sleep time was very short. I went to the hospital to see a doctor, and the doctor said that it might be a physiological disorder caused by the hormone drugs used during the coma, or it might be because the toxins are still in the body. At present, the hospital can't give an accurate answer. Ms. Alexander, have you had any episodes recently? Are these the symptoms of ALS you mentioned? I don't think so. Ali Rodriguez Alexander stared at Zhao. She wasn't sure if she had fully recovered. After all, ALS was a disease that was hard to detect and prevent. Once it was discovered, it might be in the middle or late stages. Ali Rodriguez Alexander's current state was also very strange. It didn't matter if she was fine or not. Zhao also wanted to see how Ali Rodriguez Alexander was doing. After all, in order to expel the poison from her body, Zhao had fed her the perfect crystal mixture and injected a bit of immortal power. Zhao wasn't sure what would happen if immortal power entered a normal person's body. Zhao checked Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. That wisp of immortal power was still in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. It hadn't been consumed, but it hadn't strengthened either. Zhao was surprised. He didn't expect the immortal power to still be there. One must know that this trace of immortal energy was as insignificant as a matchstick. But immortal power actually existed in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. The immortal power wasn't constantly maintained in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's dantian, but automatically circulated in her body. It was this trace of immortal power that kept Ali Rodriguez Alexander in a state of excitement. It's fine, Chen Zhao said. Since you can't sleep, then sleep less. Don't take any tranquilizers. Your body is fine, so don't worry. Hearing that, Ali Rodriguez Alexander heaved a sigh of relief. Chen Zhao realized that the wisp of immortal power was not ordinary qi. It was more like a key that unlocked a certain switch in Ali Rodriguez Alexander's body. Chen Zhao fell into deep thought. Ali Rodriguez Alexander's potential should have been unlocked by the immortal power. According to current scientific inference, there is some kind of switch in the human body. Once this switch was turned on, one would be able to surpass ordinary people. All the attributes of the body would increase. Chen Zhao thought of the primordial family. Could the primordial family be the evolved version of humans? If the immortal power in Ali Rodriguez Alexander remained, would she evolve into the primordial family? Mr. Chen, what are you thinking about? Is there something wrong with my body? Sorry, Chen Zhao said. I was distracted. Don't worry, you're very healthy. Even healthier than I expected. Is it really okay? Ali Rodriguez Alexander was still a bit worried. After all, Ali Rodriguez Alexander was already at the age of knowing her destiny. However, her body was uncharacteristically excited, her appetite increased, and her athletic ability increased. If she was a young person, she definitely wouldn't think too much. But now Ali Rodriguez Alexander was an old woman. She wondered if this was the final radiance of a setting sun. Rydra had also examined Ali Rodriguez Alexander. She also realized that Ali Rodriguez Alexander was a bit too healthy. Thus, she didn't dare to jump to conclusions. That was why she suggested Ali Rodriguez Alexander find Chen Zhao. If there was a doctor in the world that Ali Rodriguez Alexander could trust, it was undoubtedly Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's answer was the same as Rydra's. Ali Rodriguez heaved a sigh of relief. Now in Rydra's eyes, Chen Zhao was the most authoritative person. Ali Rodriguez Alexander wanted Chen Zhao to stay for dinner, but Chen Zhao still refused. Ali Rodriguez Alexander walked Chen Zhao to the door. Chen Zhao glanced at the manor and said, "Go somewhere else. This place is good, but the air quality is average." Of course, Chen Zhao was just being perfunctory when he said the air quality was average. What Chen Zhao was really dissatisfied with was the thin spiritual energy here. If Chen Zhao fought with others here, his endurance would decrease by at least half. The air quality here is average, but the greenery here is great. It's relative. You can find a better place. Chen Zhao didn't explain further. If it was a normal client, Chen Zhao wouldn't even bother to say so much. For a normal person, moving was a big deal. But for Ali Rodriguez Alexander, moving was just a matter of a word. Chen Zhao thought of the land that Stephen had bought. That piece of land was really good with feng shui. Mr. Chen, do you have any recommendations? Chen Zhao shook his head with a smile. I'm not good at this, but it's easy to tell if a place has good air quality. Like Mr. Chen's Mingyue Villa? Ali Rodriguez Alexander said, smiling. Your place is really hard to leave. Ali Rodriguez Alexander could clearly feel the obvious difference between her manor and Chen Zhao's Mingyue Villa. Ali Rodriguez Alexander thought that it was because of the environment. The view was wide and the sea breeze blew. The air from the sea was unpolluted. Chapter 1838. As soon as Eli and Chen Zhao reached the door, they saw a car drive in. An old man in his 50s hurriedly got out. The old man seemed to be in a hurry. His face was full of anxiety. Ms. Alexander, can you give me 3 minutes? Just 3 minutes. Seeing this, Chen Zhao said to Ali Rodriguez Alexander, I'm leaving. Ellie was a bit unhappy with the old man's request, but she still bid farewell to Chen Zhao peacefully. Chen Zhao glanced at the old man, nodded slightly, and turned to leave. The old man seemed to have something to ask of Ellie. When Chen Zhao's car drove out of Ellie's manor, he saw the old man's car drive out too. It seemed like Ali Rodriguez Alexander had only given him 3 minutes. When Chen Zhao got home, Exa and Li and Kalon were huddled together, discussing something. Chen Zhao's face darkened. He hadn't even hugged his daughter properly, and she was already with a pig, right? Chen Zhao eavesdropped on their conversation. They were all talking about the golden apple. Chen Zhao sat beside the two. When do you plan on leaving? Uncle. Li glanced at Chen Zhao. We're still searching for more information about the golden apple. Did you find anything? Nothing. Seems like we really need the Book of Prometheus to unlock the secret of the golden apple. I have high hopes for you. Uncle, aren't you going to stop us from stealing the Book of Prometheus from the British Museum? Oh, then don't go. Uncle, how can you go back on your word? See? I tried to stop you, but you threw a tantrum. What's there to stop? Chen Zhao shrugged. It's fine as long as you don't kill anyone. It's best if you can limit the impact to something that can be settled with money. Li actually felt embarrassed. After all, Chen Zhao had already said that. He even considered how to clean up after Chen Zhao in the end. Boss, I'll take the afternoon off. Portia walked to Chen Zhao. For what? There's an audition in the afternoon. Mr. Stephen recommended me. Alright, you can go. Portia left in a hurry. She had to prepare for the audition. He didn't have anything to do in the afternoon, so he planned to walk around UCLA. However, Li and Kalon probably couldn't handle so many kids by themselves, so Chen Zhao planned to bring them along. Chen Zhao brought a bunch of kids to school and attracted some attention. Chen Zhao brought the kids into Wright's office. They directly occupied Wright's office. Chen, where did you kidnap so many kids? Wright was speechless at Jerlin, who had already climbed onto her desk. Grandma, do you have games on your computer? Jerlin looked at Wright with watery eyes. Wright looked at Chen Zhao helplessly. They're all children I adopted. Chen Zhao shrugged. Just then KG Sayer walked in. When he saw Chen Zhao, his expression darkened. But when he saw the large group of children, he couldn't help but be stunned. Headmaster. Yes, what is it? The volleyball club needs to buy some equipment, so we hope to get some funds, KG Sayer said. This is the application form. Chen Zhao didn't speak at the side. After KG Sayer left, he finally spoke. Right. I asked you to help me find out about this woman. Have you figured it out yet? KG Sayer's hostility toward Chen Zhao was very obvious. But Chen Zhao didn't even know her. So, Chen Zhao had always been curious about what kind of grudge this woman had against him. It's none of my business. Solve your own problem. Why don't you ask her directly? Wright didn't plan to help at all. Instead, she gloated. Tell me the truth. You really don't know her? Could it be that you slept with her before? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes and glared at Wright. Do you believe that I'll bring them here every day? It's okay. I like kids. You better come a few more days. Clang. Wright's cup on the table hit the ground and shattered. Jerlin stuck out her tongue. Grandma, Wright, sorry. It's okay. Wright's face twitched. Crack, suddenly, Kilo held a bunch of flowers in his hands. Kilo looked at Wright, his face bright red. Wright's jaw dropped as she stared at the flower in Kilo's hand. Sorry, Grandma Wright. I accidentally pulled the flowers out. Kilo wasn't very familiar with controlling his power. It was mainly because he was still growing, and his increase in power was very unstable. Sometimes his strength would suddenly increase without rhyme or reason. Wright wanted to cry. That was her favorite daffodil. In the end, Kilo pulled it out directly. Chen Zhao walked over and snatched the daffodil from Kilo's hands, then stuffed it back into the pot. It's okay. Grandma Wright won't blame you. Wright really wanted to roar. But with her temperament, she managed to restrain the anger in her heart. She just stared at Chen Zhao with a murderous gaze. Okay. Looks like Grandma Wright is a little angry. Let's go. Chen Zhao tricked Wright and left with the kids chuckling. Kalon brought Li and the other kids to walk around the school. Chen Zhao carried little Jerlin and little Larissa. Didi also followed beside him. Just then Lit Grove walked over. Grove. Teacher. Lit Grove was also surprised to see Chen Zhao. What's wrong? You look down. Nothing. Lit Grove shook his head. But judging from his expression, something had clearly happened. Then treat me and the kids to dinner tonight. Smiling, Chen Zhao looked at Little Grove. Lit Grove's face turned purple. Teacher. I'm a bit short on money recently. What's wrong? Isn't your dad a superstar? You're short on money. In Chen Zhao's impression, Lit Grove had always been generous. Plus, he He wasn't working in the morgue anymore. He was a real intern. Teacher, if I want to borrow some money, will you lend it to me? Lit Grove asked, his face bright red. How much? Chun Zhao asked, taking out his wallet. $10 million. What? $10 million? What do you need $10 million for? Chun Zhao stared at Lit Grove in shock. Chapter 1839. Lit Grove turned his head. If you can't, then forget it. Tell me first. What do you want $10 million for? Do you owe money? Chun Zhao could afford the $10 million. Also, Lit Grove had performed very well in the past 6 months. If he really needed it, Chun Zhao was willing to lend him money. It's not me who wants it. It's my dad who needs it. Lit Grove said. My father invested in a movie, but now the capital chain is broken. If my father can't come up with the follow-up funds, the project will probably be ruined. This is a check for $10 million. Chun Zhao took out the consultation fee that Ellie Rodriguez Alexander had given him today. $10 million. Little Grove was stunned for a moment. Now the money was in front of him. He didn't dare to reach out to take it. Teacher, this. I have to return it, Chun Zhao said. While Lit Grove was still in a daze, Chun Zhao stuffed the check into his hands. Can you treat us to dinner now? Teacher, I don't have a single cent with me, except for this check. Forget it. I'll treat you, okay? After calling the kids who were still wandering around in school, Chun Zhao's family went out to eat with Lit Grove. Although Lit Grove had received Chun Zhao's loan of $10 million, Chun Zhao had given him a lot of money. However, he still looked worried. The atmosphere at the dining table was still a little gloomy and preoccupied. Grove, do you not have enough money? Enough, teacher. If it's not enough, just tell me. It's not that. Lit Grove shook his head. His expression showed that he had something on his mind. He sighed and said, It's my dad's project. I really don't have much confidence. Are you that pessimistic about your father's film project? Sigh. Dad is too radical this time. Although he is very famous in Hollywood, he hasn't produced any memorable works in the past few years. None of his works have performed well at the box office. So Dad has become very impatient. He is eager to prove himself with this project, so I am very worried that he will fail. Didn't you persuade him? How could he listen to me? Lit Grove shook his head with a bitter smile. In his eyes, I'm still that kid who asks him for money every day. Aren't you? Chun Zhao mercilessly exposed Lit Grove's true nature. Teacher, I've already restrained myself a lot this year. All right? Your father's project is an independent film. Yes, he's the main character himself. I heard that he received a script after watching Mr. Stevens' last 2 movies. Not only did it succeed in the box office, but it also won the Oscars, Lit Grove said helplessly. Anyway, it's a very ambitious work. All right, let the adults handle their own matters. Since your father chose this movie project, he must have his own considerations. After all, he's more professional than you. Chun Zhao could only comfort Ritter Grove with these words. After all, Chun Zhao had been in the film industry before. More or less, he knew some inside information about movies. No company or project could guarantee the success of a movie. Even Steven was known as the king of the box office and the king of directors. But every one of his own movies was treading on thin ice. Even he wasn't confident, let alone others. There were many factors that contributed to a movie's failure. Even the successful movies in history might not succeed. Another director might not be able to do it either. But movies that failed in the box office all had one thing in common. They were ugly. The public didn't like it. Most independent movies had this problem. A movie with a plot that wasn't friendly to ordinary audiences would definitely fail in the box office. So sometimes professionals might not have more accurate eyes than ordinary audiences. Just like the cloud map from a few years ago. That movie was made by the Wachowski siblings, the directors of The Matrix. It was said to be their most ambitious work. In the end, the box office suffered a huge loss. The plot was very obscure. Ordinary audiences couldn't understand it at all. So it was natural that it failed. Grove, where did you go this time? Drow Grove sat in the living room. Dissatisfaction written all over his face. You're not young anymore. You should learn to be independent and not go out to play every day. I'm at school all day today, Lit Grove retorted. Lit Grove retorted. Please don't vent your unhappiness at work on me. I'm your father. Drow Grove's voice suddenly rose. Indeed, everything had been going wrong for him recently. He had run into a wall everywhere he looked for investments. This made him suppress an unknown anger in his heart that he had nowhere to vent. Lit Grove took out the check. Here's $10 million. Stunned, Drow Grove took the check and looked at it. Where did you get it? I borrowed it, Lit Grove replied. Borrowed? Where did you get it? Did you find a loan shark? No, I didn't. I borrowed it from a friend. Don't worry about the interest. Just pay the bank interest when you pay it back. Show me the loan contract, Drow Grove said seriously. If he didn't know where the check came from, he wouldn't dare to use it. Even though Lit Grove had made it clear, he was still worried that Lit Grove would be cheated. Some loans seemed harmless on the surface, but actually hid deep traps. There's no loan contract, Lit Grove said. My relationship with him doesn't need a loan contract. How is that possible? If there's no loan contract, how can your friend be sure that you'll pay it back? Anyway, don't worry. No, you have to tell me who you borrowed the money from. It's my teacher, a university teacher, Lit Grove said. A university teacher? A university teacher is that rich? No, he's just an exception. Anyway, he's very rich. Are you sure he's fine? I'm not a child, Lit Grove said. Drow Grove's eyes flickered. If there was no loan contract, Dad, don't mess around. My teacher has a huge network, and he's very rich. If you don't pay him back, he'll make sure you can't survive in Hollywood. I'm a Hollywood A-lister. No one can make me lose my career. Can Mr. Steven do that? He can, but I don't have any conflicts with him. Chapter 1840. He can get Mr. Steven to ban you. Trust me, as long as he asks, Mr. Steven will make you disappear from Hollywood forever. Your teacher knows Mr. Steven? Not only do they know each other, he and Mr. Steven are best friends. They invested in the movie Kidnapped, which is currently airing. Little Grove shook his head. Plus, his assets are in the tens of billions. He can kill you with money. Drow Grove inhaled sharply. He did not know that his son's teacher had such a powerful background. He glanced at the check in his hand. 10 million was tempting, but it wasn't worth risking his life. A super rich man was terrifying. Neither he nor his son could fight against him. Son, when are you going to introduce me to your teacher? Forget it. My teacher doesn't like to have anything to do with you. Drow Grove was rather disappointed. If only he'd known that his son knew such a super rich man. He would have gotten to know him earlier. After Kalon said goodbye, Chen Zhao immediately pulled Exionly to his side. Exionly, I'm not against you dating, but my request is that you're not allowed to sleep with any man before you turn 18. Uncle, Exionly looked at Chen Zhao, her face bright red. Okay, I know what you want to say. That's my request. Chen Zhao shrugged. You can leave now. Exionly stomped away. Chen Zhao added from behind. Oh, I know what you want to say. By the way, if I find out that someone had sex with you, I will crush that man's organs, no matter who that man is. Exionly was already furious. She ran away, her face bright red. You can't take a joke, Chen Zhao said, chuckling. Fei Lai placed a plate of cut fruits before Chen Zhao. Are you joking with Exionly? No, I'm serious. Don't you think it's too early for Exionly to talk about this? Don't you think it'll be too late when it happens? Just then, the deer strolled over and started eating the fruits on Chen Zhao's plate. It had been 2 weeks since the deer came home. It had gradually familiarized itself with the environment. It was no longer afraid of everything in Mingyue Villa like before. Chen Zhao waved his hand, and the deer strolled toward him. It liked to be touched and enjoyed it very much. Chen Zhao stroked the deer, feeling the trace of immortal power in its body. This was what Chen Zhao had sent into its body. Just like Elie Rodriguez Alexander, the immortal power in its body was also preserved. And it was moving all over his body. Compared to the first time it came here, the deer was much stronger. At that time it was suffering from disease. Chen Zhao silently checked the deer's condition. He also discovered that the immortal power in the deer's body seemed to have grown stronger. Chen Zhao was surprised. Why was the immortal power in the deer so strong? This situation didn't seem to happen to Ellie Rodriguez Alexander. Chen Zhao didn't understand why this had happened. Why was the immortal energy in Little Deer's body so strong? There should be no reason for this to happen, right? Although the immortal power was in Little Deer's body, Little Deer didn't know how to circulate it. Why was it growing stronger in its body? And why didn't this happen to Ellie Rodriguez Alexander? What was the difference between the two? Chen Zhao fell into deep thought. Chen Zhao suddenly thought of a possibility. Animals could demonize, but humans couldn't. Transvestites didn't count. Was it possible that Little Deer was also demonizing? But Ellie Rodriguez Alexander definitely wouldn't become a monster or a deity because of a trace of immortal power. If Chen Zhao guessed, what would Little Deer become in the end? This made Chen Zhao even more curious. Would it really demonize? Chen Zhao looked at his hands. The power of yin and yang flowed between his palms. Then he carefully sent it into Little Deer's body. The deer suddenly fell to the ground with a thud, its body stiff. Oh no! Chen Zhao hurriedly picked up Little Deer. He couldn't be dead, right? Chen Zhao immediately checked Little Deer's body. Little Deer's heart was still beating, but the power of yin and yang was creating conflict. Originally, there were two distinct powers in Chen Zhao's body. But in Little Deer's body, there were side effects. The power of yin was cosmic rays. It was chaotic and hard to control. Right now, it was continuously destroying Little Deer's body. The power of yang was pure immortal power. It was full of vitality. It kept repairing Little Deer's damaged body. It was the two powers that made Little Deer lose its ability to move, and even its consciousness. Chen Zhao hurriedly guided the two powers. Originally, the two powers coexisted harmoniously in Chen Zhao's body in the form of a yin-yang fish, forming a stable state. But Little Deer didn't know how to control the power of yin and yang. So, Chen Zhao had to control it. However, these two forces were too weak. They weren't enough to form a yin-yang fish. Chen Zhao couldn't send in more power. After all, Little Deer's body was also weak. It couldn't handle more power. Chen Zhao slowly controlled the two powers so that they wouldn't run amok. No, once they left Chen Zhao's control, the two powers would run amok again. Should he just let them run amok? Chen Zhao hesitated. Or should he just take back the two powers? Chen Zhao couldn't think of a solution no matter how hard he thought. He could only take back the power of yin and yang. If he allowed the two powers to continue running amok, logically, the power of yin and yang should counter each other. But destroying was much easier than recovering. The power of yin could easily wreak havoc in Little Deer's body. But the power of yang couldn't repair Little Deer's body so quickly. So, if this situation continued, Little Deer would definitely die. Chen Zhao didn't want Little Deer to die yet, so he could only take back the power. Chen Zhao left a bit more celestial power in it, and fused it with the previous strand of celestial power. Soon, the immortal power started repairing Little Deer's body. But Little Deer fell into a deep sleep. Chen Zhao couldn't continue experimenting on Little Deer now. He could only put it in his nest first. The power of yin and yang that he'd just distributed shouldn't be 50% each. According to the situation, yin and yang should be 25% and 75%. That way, when the power of yin destroyed Little Deer, yang could keep up with the recovery speed. But Chen Zhao himself was a perfect 55. This was because his body was strong enough. It wouldn't be destroyed or killed by the power of yin. Chapter 1841. Chen Zhao looked around and saw Princess. Chen Zhao hesitated again. Because of that accident, Princess had been fed a demonic potion by Chen Zhao and turned into a hybrid demon. But other than the change in size, Princess didn't change much. Chen Zhao wanted test subjects now. The requirement was that the test subjects couldn't have their own energy. For example, Black Ma, White Ma, Beelzebub, Raymond, Carrie, King Kong, Abitos, and Amon weren't suitable. They all had magic power that would conflict with Chen Zhao's immortal power. Secondly, they needed a strong body. In this aspect, Princess was the strongest among all the pets. She was also the pet that could support Chen Zhao's power. Princess, come here. Princess immediately ran to Chen Zhao with her short, thick limbs. Princess was the closest to Chen Zhao. She was different from the deer. To Chen Zhao, the deer was just a test subject. It could even be used as dog food at any time. Chen Zhao didn't feel burdened at all. But Princess was like a family member. In other words, they had feelings for each other. So, Chen Zhao couldn't test it like he did with the deer. After experimenting on the deer, Chen Zhao had some experience and was more confident. So he decided to try it on Princess. Chen Zhao sent strands of yin and yang energy into Princess's body according to the ratio of 25% and 75%. The princess immediately sensed this energy with her keen senses. After it was sent into Princess's body, it rampaged around just like how it had been in the deer's body. However, Princess's body was many times stronger than the deer's. Because of the difference in ratio, the damage and recovery were basically the same for Princess. So Princess didn't feel pain. She even felt comfortable. Chen Zhao realized that Princess's body seemed to have grown bigger. Moreover, the princess's muscles had also tightened. But because of her fur, her muscles weren't obvious. Princess's front paws slammed on the ground, creating a crack. Chen Zhao was surprised. The crack wasn't caused by pure power. It was more like some special power. Princess should be able to accept more yin and yang energy, Chen Zhao thought. At the same time, he sent a strand of yin and yang energy. Just then, Princess's growth became even more obvious. Princess's weight was already 2,000 kilograms. At this moment, its physique had grown tremendously. Chen Zhao took out an electronic scale. It was specially modified from a cow scale. It could even weigh a few thousand kilograms of weight. Princess stepped onto the electronic scale. A number immediately appeared on the electronic scale. 2,878 kilograms. Chen Zhao exclaimed. The princess's growth was too obvious. Just like that, he gained about 800 kilograms out of nowhere. Princess, do you have any special abilities? The princess howled twice. There is. Ow. The princess nodded. Can I use it here? Ow ow. The princess shook her head. Then let's go to the courtyard. Chen Zhao and the princess stood face to face. Use it on me. Tilting her head, Princess looked at him hesitantly. Princess never attacked him. This was the loyalty of the princess. It didn't understand why Chen Zhao wanted it to attack it. Although the princess was very smart, there were some requests that conflicted with her principles, so her brain couldn't function properly. Forget it. Attack that tree. Chen Zhao pointed at a dwarf tree in the yard. Chen Zhao had spent tens of thousands of dollars to transplant this tree. Of course, it wasn't an expensive plant. It was just beautiful. Princess didn't have much sympathy for this dwarf tree. She slammed her claws on the ground. Hiss, a tearing sound spread out. Immediately, Chen Zhao felt a wave of power being released along the sound. The power that Princess released was channeled through the ground. However, it didn't spread out like lightning. Instead, it formed a straight line. Crack! The dwarf fir tree several meters away suddenly split in half. It was as if Princess was born to use this power. The new power she'd obtained was different from Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao had also obtained an unfamiliar power before. But after he obtained it, he didn't know how to use it at first. He had to explore and practice on his own to slowly familiarize himself with it. But Princess did it directly. Of course, this was probably because of her animal nature. But Chen Zhao was more curious about the mechanism by which Princess obtained this power. It wasn't the mechanism itself, but the process of obtaining the power. How was it triggered? Beelzebub had once said that after demonization, creatures had a certain chance of obtaining special abilities. But Princess had never obtained special abilities before. So this didn't count as awakening a special ability? If this was a special ability after demonization, then in other words, after the princess demonized, she already had this ability. Now after using the yin and yang energy, this ability was revealed. It wasn't hard to confirm the mechanism of obtaining this ability. Walter and White Snow were also half demons. After experimenting on Princess, Chen Zhao was even more familiar with it. So Chen Zhao was confident that he could complete the experiment while ensuring Walter and White Snow's safety. Chen Zhao called White Snow to his side first. The entire process was like Princess. However, White Snow's body was far from Princess. It could only withstand 1/5 of Princess energy at most. Chen Zhao sent the yin and yang energy into White Snow's body. White Snow's body shook violently. Then it split into two and became two Snowies. Then two became four. Chen Zhao looked at White Snow's transformation in surprise. Doppelganger? Was this its special ability? Chen Zhao did the same experiment on Walter's body. Chen Zhao realized that Walter could actually teleport. But it wasn't the kind where he could appear a dozen or dozens of meters in a flash. His body flickered very slightly, perhaps only a meter away. But the frequency was very fast. Chen Zhao had encountered enemies who could flash before. But he'd never seen someone flash so frequently. If one didn't observe closely, one would only think that Walter was running fast and not teleporting. Was this evolution? Chen Zhao didn't know whether it was evolution or mutation. Walter, the princess, and Snow White were all born with knowledge. It seemed like they didn't need to practice or others to teach them. They already knew and mastered their special abilities. Oh, the 5 tiger generals and dolphins family seemed to be able to undergo the same enhancement. Chen Zhao didn't care how much celestial power he had to pay. It wouldn't cost much in the first place. Plus, with so much celestial power, it would only take a few days of cultivation. Chen Zhao wanted to see what special abilities the 5 tiger generals and dolphins family would obtain. Chapter 1842. But Chen Zhao still hesitated. Because they weren't half demons. The 5 tiger generals and the dolphin family weren't demons. Back then, Chen Zhao had turned Princess and Snow White into half demons. Because they'd been on the verge of death. Demonization was an irreversible process. Plus, it wasn't completely safe every time. So after thinking for a long time, Chen Zhao gave up on the idea. At night, Chen Zhao rose to an altitude of 50,000 meters again. Chen Zhao tried to fly higher, but he still couldn't escape the restraints of oxygen. Chen Zhao could absorb the oxygen in the small world. But once he reached a vacuum environment, the oxygen in the small world would completely disappear. Chen Zhao couldn't absorb it even if he wanted to. By then, he would have to hold his breath. 50,000 meters was a relatively easy altitude. He couldn't go any higher. Plus, the higher the altitude, the stronger the cosmic rays. Chen Zhao didn't need that much strength right now. This had basically become a daily routine for Chen Zhao. But he couldn't absorb cosmic rays endlessly. Chen Zhao needed to maintain a balance between yin and yang. The amount of celestial power he absorbed was the same amount of cosmic rays. As Chen Zhao absorbed more and more cosmic rays, his body was almost covered in a layer of high-energy light. Chen Zhao's body was almost covered in a layer of high-energy light, like a ball of light. Suddenly, Chen Zhao sensed something. He raised his head and looked up. Space station? Did the space station find him? At the same time, the astronauts in the space station were reporting to the ground. ISS Alpha. It is now 1:23 a.m. New York time. We are 30,000 meters above the Pacific Ocean, at coordinates 33, 1555 E, 118, 72004 N, and we have discovered a high-energy light source. We are unable to determine the specific origin of the object. The object has strong cosmic radiation. Just then, the headquarters of many stations on the ground received this information. Because the location was above American territorial waters, NASA naturally reported this to the Department of Defense. Apart from space shuttles, the only plane that could fly at this altitude was the Night Owl. The Night Owl, B-1, was also the highest plane in the world. It was a combination of fighter and bomber. It could reach a height of 60,000 meters and a top speed of Mach 2.5. After receiving the order from the Air Force of the Department of Defense, a Night Owl flew toward the sea. Malone Williamston and the co-pilot Heckman Sprin were nervous. After all, they were facing an unknown. Even the instructions given to them by the Air Force Command were vague. Soon, they discovered a high-energy light source in the distance. This is Nightingale B-1, serial number S21. We have arrived above the area where the incident occurred. We can see the high-energy light source with the naked eye. Air Force Command, please issue an order. I repeat, this is... Can you communicate with the other party through radio waves? I've tried to communicate with him, but he didn't respond. Launch a Stinger missile at this object. Please repeat. Do you want us to attack the object? Yes, you heard me right. Attack the object. This was the habit of the Americans. They would always launch probing attacks on unknown objects in the sky above their territory. This was mainly because after September 11th, the United States was overly nervous about its territorial security. Even if it was a commercial airliner, once it deviated from its course, it would be regarded as a threat and shot down. Target locked. Please confirm the missile strike command again. Attack. Malone and Hemmons Prin looked at each other and exchanged glances. Malone activated the missile lock-on system. Fire 2 Stinger L-12s. Suddenly, Chen Zhao felt Nightingale and the missile flying toward him. Fuck. Chen Zhao cursed and moved instantly. This wasn't an RGP missile. Stinger L-12 was an airborne missile. The Stinger L-12's speed reached Mach 5. Most aircrafts couldn't avoid the Stinger L-12's pursuit. Chen Zhao realized that the two missiles were moving extremely fast. He suddenly lowered his altitude and exploded with speed. However, the two missiles were still locked onto Chen Zhao. Serial number S21. Report the strike result. Stinger L-12 is tracking the target. It hasn't hit the target yet. The target moves very fast and is very strong in the air. The two missiles were almost at the same speed as him. However, Chen Zhao didn't plan on destroying the two missiles. Instead, he played hide-and-seek with them. There were very few people who could compete with him in this game of speed. Chen Zhao kept performing various actions in the air. It wasn't just the two missiles. Even the plane was tracking him. Chen Zhao had an idea. He suddenly did a backflip in the air and flew toward the Nightingale. Oh no, that object is coming toward us. Dodge, dodge. The two missiles tailed Chen Zhao and flew toward the Nightingale. Immediately, the two pilots shot out from the cockpit. Boom, boom. With two huge explosions, the Nightingale turned into a fireball and fell from the sky. Seeing that his toys were gone, Chen Zhao dove into the sea. A thought suddenly popped up in his mind. Maybe he could find a group of American airmen to play with every day. He looked up at the two parachutes slowly falling from the sky. God bless those two unlucky pilots. Chen Zhao muttered to himself, gloating. Chen Zhao gloated to himself and left via the waterway. In the water, he was even faster than on land and in the sky. Not only did the seawater not obstruct him, it even pushed him to the highest speed. Moreover, the seawater could block the surveillance of the satellites in the sky. Chen Zhao didn't care how much of an impact he caused today. It had nothing to do with him anyway. Right now, both the International Space Station and the American Air Force were in an uproar. To Chen Zhao, being captured by the International Space Station was an accident. He really wanted to shoot down all the satellites in the sky, but he knew that it was impossible. Even the lowest low Earth orbit satellite was hundreds of kilometers from the ground. There were even higher ones, such as the International Space Station. At its lowest, it was more than 300 kilometers from the ground. For now, Chen Zhao couldn't fly that high, but he believed that one day, he would be able to use his body to challenge extreme heights. As for traveling in the sky, it could only stay in Chen Zhao's mind for now. He'd gone too far just now. It was probably 2,000 kilometers from the shore. Chen Zhao silently returned to Mingyue Villa. Suddenly, he saw a cruise stop on the sea. Chen Zhao was a bit surprised. Why would the cruise stop at such a remote place? 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1843. The ship definitely wouldn't stop in the deep waters before reaching the port. This was because it was a very dangerous thing to do. The size of the cruise ship was too big. It could be knocked over by the waves when it stopped. A ship could have 3,000 to 4,000 people including the crew. They could face this danger at any time. So the ship would only stop at the port. The waves at the port would definitely be small. Moreover, there were ropes to secure the ship and protect it. Because of this, Chen Zhao stopped to observe the ship. It wasn't that Chen Zhao was a professional. It was just that when he'd bought the ship, the professionals had told him about this. Just then, a small boat approached the ship. Chen Zhao was in the water, but he could still see the people climbing up from the boat. He knew a few of them. They were from the psionic team. The Blue Giant, the cruise ship, was 368 meters long and 55 meters wide, with a capacity of 4,500 passengers. But right now, The ship was suffering from a disaster. Shh, don't make a sound. A man forcefully covered the mouth of a woman whose face was full of tears. The two of them were hiding in a narrow cabin. The man was also very nervous and terrified. The small cabin was filled with a terrifying atmosphere. I'll let go of your mouth now. Don't make a sound, understand? The woman nodded slightly. Jack let go of the woman's mouth. She didn't make a sound. The two hid in the cabin in fear. Occasionally, the sound of heavy objects colliding could be heard from the cabin's metal door. The woman held a silver cross in her hand. She mumbled something as if she was praying. Jack glanced at her. Are you a tourist? The woman nodded and glanced at Jack. He was wearing a sailor suit. It seemed that he was a crew member. I'm Jack. What's your name? Maeve. Do you have a communicator or something? Jack asked. Maeve took out her phone. Yes, but there's no signal. Jack's face was filled with disappointment. Maeve trembled. What was that? I don't know. I don't know. Jack shook his head. Just 2 hours ago, the blue giant was suddenly attacked by unknown creatures. There were many of them, and they were cruel and bloodthirsty. They even started a massacre on the ship. They were like demons that had crawled out of hell, wantonly slaughtering defenseless humans. Suddenly, a horrifying and distorted black face peered through the window. Jack and Maeve's scalps were about to explode. They all hid under the door, not daring to make the slightest sound. The demon didn't notice Jack and Maeve right under his nose. After a few more glances, he turned around and left. At this time, 2 voices came from outside. It was a language they had never heard before. At this moment, the silver cross in Maeve's hand suddenly felt a burning sensation. Maeve immediately covered her mouth, her other hand holding the cross tightly. She was afraid that she would cry out in pain, but at the same time, she did not dare to throw the cross away. This small cross seemed to be her only support. Jack stood up carefully and glanced outside. At this moment, the face that should have left reappeared. Jack met Jonah's eyes. Then, a claw pierced through the hatch in Jack's chest. Maeve covered her mouth, her face full of fear and panic. He curled up in a corner, not daring to make a sound. Jack's body was trembling. But from beginning to end, he did not look at Maeve. This might be his last responsibility as a man. His heart was pulled out by the demon, and his body slowly fell to the ground. The demon outside scratched the hatch with its claws. Maeve's body was already stiff. The hatch was directly cut open, and Maeve finally saw the full appearance of the demon who killed Jack. The demon's skin was dark, with a pair of protruding horns on his head, red pupils and pointed ears. However, the most impressive thing about him was his hands. All 10 of his fingers were long and slender claws. His left hand was also holding a heart, Jack's heart. The demon licked his lips, took a deep breath with his hooked nose, and then began to look around the cabin. Maeve found that the demon did not seem to see her. His eyes swept over her body, but did not linger on her body. This made Maeve very surprised. Why is this? Could it be because of this cross pendant of hers? The demon's mouth made strange syllables. At this moment, the wind suddenly rose in the cabin. Maeve subconsciously shrank, and there was a subtle sound of friction under her feet. The demon's pupil shrank, and he suddenly looked at Maeve's position. But he still could not see Maeve. He smelled the scent of a second person in the cabin. He also heard the sound just now. The demon tilted his head and kept looking at the corner, at Maeve's position. The demon began to walk in Maeve's direction, and then reached out. Maeve was so frightened that she threw the cross directly at the demon. In an instant, Maeve's figure was revealed, and the cross hit the demon's face. Ah! The demon let out an unbearable howl of pain. The cross was like a branding iron, leaving a cross mark directly on his face. Maeve took the opportunity to quickly crawl out of the cabin with her limbs. The desire to survive made her extremely fast. But after a few steps, she saw the corpses lying on the ground. The demon had come out of the cabin, his face full of rage. The cross mark on his face was very obvious. Run, keep running. The demon licked his lips. The demon's human language was not very smooth, but Maeve could understand it. The demon's face was full of mockery. He wanted to talk about being a mouse. Maeve suddenly turned and rushed around the corner. The next moment, Maeve suddenly grabbed the cross. Stealth, stealth, stealth. The demon came to the corner, and did not see her. The demon strolled past in front of Maeve. But after 2 steps, he stopped and turned to look at Maeve, a cruel smile on his face. Maeve's face was extremely pale. She did not know if she was invisible or not. "Your smell, you deceived my eyes, but you can't deceive my nose." The demon came in front of Maeve again. Maeve could smell the disgusting stench of the demon. The demon opened his mouth, revealing a mouth full of fangs. His breath was so close. Maeve gripped the cross tightly. "Give him another one." "Should I give him again?" Suddenly, the demon's movements stopped, and he froze in place. Slowly, the demon's body leaned forward and fell in front of Maeve. Maeve shrank back in fear and looked down. There was an arrow in the back of the demon's head. Maeve looked in the other direction of the aisle in shock. She saw a hooded woman standing at the end of the aisle, holding a small crossbow in her hand. Chapter 1844. Maeve collapsed to the ground. The hooded woman walked over and looked down at Maeve. Just then, a few more people came from the other side of the aisle. Fritz looked at Maeve and stretched out his hand. "Can you stand up?" Maeve slowed down and looked at the people in front of her with a pale face. "Who are you?" Fritz helped Maeve up. "Someone who specializes in this kind of problem." Maeve suddenly broke down. Why did this happen? Why? For Maeve, what happened here was like a nightmare. Clatter, clatter. Just then, there was a dense sound from the front of the aisle. Then, a demon with a wooden staff appeared at the corner of the aisle. The demon was wearing a tattered robe and was extremely skinny, not even as strong as an ordinary person. There was only one eye on his face, no nose, and no teeth in his mouth. He made strange syllables. He was surrounded by very small demons. Those little demons were only the size of a fist, and their bodies were like balls, with only a mouth full of fangs and short limbs. These little demons were very good at climbing. They could climb onto walls or ceilings, and their movements were very fast and agile. The skinny demon pointed his wooden staff at the crowd. The group of little demons suddenly charged at the crowd. "Burner of the wilderness, reveal your true form." Sam Mira quickly used ancient god magic, and a fiery ethereal blocked in front of the crowd. The little demons pounced at the fiery ethereal, but before they could get close, they were blocked by the scorching heat and were easily roasted to the ground. The fiery ethereal closed in on the skinny demon. The skinny demon pointed his wooden staff at the ethereal, but before he could release magic, the staff had already been ignited. The temperature around the ethereal was very high. "Let's go. We'll follow behind," Sam Mira said. With the ethereal leading the way, the whole process was very smooth. Occasionally, demons that popped up from a corner were instantly burned to ashes. Maeve was completely shocked. There was actually such a supernatural thing in this world. Demon. Magic. So weak. As soon as Sam Mira finished speaking, the ethereal was suddenly smashed by a figure that suddenly rushed out. It was a muscular monster, a tall demon. This demon's body wasn't very large. It could only be said to be sturdy. He was 2 meters tall, and his head was 2 to 3 times the size of a normal person. He had a pair of bull horns on his forehead. It had almost no neck, and below its head was its shoulders. Its skin was bright red, and its body was so strong that it looked like hundreds of muscles were piled together. Hee. The muscular devil let out a strange laugh. Roar. The tank roared and rushed towards the muscular demon. Pung. The arms of the tank and the muscular devil pushed against each other as they wrestled with each other. Tank's body was no smaller than this muscular demon, and his strength was similar. However, everyone had calm expressions on their faces, because they were able to match this muscular demon without even transforming into a tank. Therefore, in their opinion, the tank would definitely win. Ah! The muscular demon suddenly let out a painful howl. Both of his arms were broken by the tank. Tank headbutt the muscular devil on the head. The muscular devil instantly lost the ability to resist and fell to the ground. However, the next moment, more muscular demons appeared in front of them. Countless, densely packed, muscular devils. Tank roared again. His body suddenly grew, reaching a height of 3 meters. Violent crushing. The tank charged forward in a berserk manner. He ran from the original spot to the end of the corridor. The muscular devils along the way were all crushed by the tank. Maeve looked at the tank in shock. Was he still human? She had thought that it would be a tough battle. However, she didn't expect the tank to be this strong. Nearly 100 muscular devils were crushed in an instant. So strong. Maeve looked at Tank's stalwart back in shock. Sam Mira shook his head, his expression not relaxing at all. Not enough, not strong enough. Not enough, far from enough. Tank said the same thing. In the past, once Tank transformed, he would lose the ability to speak. He would completely lose his mind and become a crazy killing machine. But now, he could still maintain his mind after transforming. The hooded woman glanced at everyone, confusion written all over her face. She was a newcomer to the psionic team. She didn't understand everyone's mentality. Mira, is it just my imagination? Ever since the first day I joined your team, you've been in a very strange state. Everyone's been training like crazy and accepting all kinds of missions. Is this the tradition of the psionic team? Because we have an enemy we must defeat. An extremely powerful one, Sam Mira said calmly. Sam Mira said faintly, Angelace, as long as you stay in our team, you'll have to face him one day. I've never feared any enemy, Angelace said calmly, but her eyes were filled with determination. The group continued forward, their expressions extremely serious. I feel a great evil on the left, Fritz said. Then let's go that way. I hope it'll give us a greater challenge. Devils continued to appear along the way. There were mainly 3 types. One was the one Maeve had encountered at the beginning. Their claws were long and sharp, and they had powerful cutting abilities. They also moved quickly. The other 2 types were the withered devil and the muscular devil. The withered devil was a pure magic type, while the muscular devil was a pure physical type. They were 2 extremes. None of the 3 types could cause any trouble for the psionic team. The journey was very smooth. The performance hall is up ahead, Maeve said. There was originally going to be a stage performance there tonight. Half of the ship's people were in that hall. Tank directly pushed open the door to the performance hall. In an instant, an extremely pungent stench assaulted everyone's noses. Everyone couldn't help but cover their noses. As soon as they stepped into the performance hall, everyone was shocked. This was a feast of blood and flesh. Inside the large and spacious performance hall, there were hundreds of small devils. Their skin was dry and red, and they were crazily feasting on the flesh and blood on the ground. 4 demons stood on the stage, and they were clearly different from the other demons, not only in their forms, but also in their pressuring auras. Chapter 1845. A demon sat in the center of the stage. He was astonishingly large, at least 5 meters tall. His skin was dark red, and a pair of canine teeth protruded from his chin. Even sitting on the ground, he was still taller than the other 3 demons. The male demon was around 2 meters tall, with a pair of demon wings on his back. His eyes were completely black, and his skin was also dark gray. Beside him was a great sword that was even taller than him. The other 2 demons were female. One had an enchanting figure, and her clothes were even more revealing. Only her breasts and lower body were covered. This female demon's figure was almost the same as a normal woman's, but more seductive. She had a pair of small demon horns on her head, and held a leather whip in her hand. There was also a female demon with long hair, and her face couldn't be seen clearly. She wore a white robe, and looked like Sadako. However, her arms were a bit too long, and they were almost touching the ground. A few more bugs. The huge demon looked at the group of uninvited guests. I like that one. The seductive demon pointed at Tank. I can feel the power in his body. Ah, how fascinating. Maeve was already trembling in fear. The atmosphere here was completely different from before. She could even feel the nervousness of the people around her. Even they could feel the tension. That meant the situation here wasn't optimistic. The demon with one hand on the great sword looked at the crowd. My children, go enjoy fresh meat. The big-headed demons turned to look at the crowd, and terrifying sounds came from their mouths. There were probably close to 1,000 big-headed demons in the performance hall. Every big-headed demon's eyes emitted a cruel and bloodthirsty light. Maeve subconsciously hid at the back of the crowd. Go, the greatsword demon ordered. In an instant, All the big demons charged at the crowd. Angelace spread her arms like a swan goose, and at the same time, performed a beautiful somersault in the air. While in the air, the crossbow in her hand instantly fired a series of arrows. Swish, swish, swish. Angelace might not be the strongest, but her killing efficiency was definitely the highest. In an instant 6 big-headed demons were shot in the eye sockets, and they were instantly killed. Tank's crushing killing method wasn't as effective as before. These big-headed demons seemed to be very resistant to force, and their bodies were very soft and elastic. Tank threw a punch with all his might, but it only bounced off the big-headed demon. It didn't pose a fatal threat. The scene was in chaos, and no one cared about Maeve's safety anymore. No one had the time to go out of their way to protect Maeve. Maeve had never been part of their plan. Suddenly, a big-headed demon lunged at Maeve. Maeve fell to the ground in fright. She could do nothing but cover her head. Puff! Maeve heard a strange muffled sound. She waited a few seconds, but didn't feel any pain. Maeve glanced around, and found that there was another person beside her. It was an Asian man. The man glanced at her, then pulled a chair over and sat down. He crossed his legs, as if he was enjoying a performance. Who are you? To watch the show, Chen Zhao answered. These demons reminded him of the demons from Bermuda. If it really was a demon from Bermuda, then the frequency of their activities was really high. Moreover, this was probably not the first or second time he had created such a tragedy. Maeve also kept her distance from Chen Zhao. The man's arrival was too sudden. Moreover, he seemed to have an uninvolved attitude. He didn't look like he was going to help the psionic team at all. Angelace, Sam, Mira, Brits, and Tank were all very powerful. There were many big-headed demons, but they could only cause some trouble for them. Apart from draining their magic power, they didn't have any other effect. Enough. Leave. The Greatsword Fiend was a terror fiend, and these big-headed fiends were his subordinates. He didn't want all his subordinates to die. Angelace, Sam, Mira, Brits, and Tank didn't notice Chen Zhao's arrival. Instead, the 4 demons in the center of the stage noticed him. The 4 people from the psionic team noticed the 4 demons' gazes. They couldn't help but turn toward the door. Instantly, hostility filled the air. Only Angelace looked at Chen Zhao confused. She didn't know him at all. What are you doing here? Brits's tone was filled with hostility and wariness. You guys better focus on the 4 demons, Chen Zhao said calmly. They don't look easy to deal with. Who is he? Angelace asked confused. Hey miss, don't you know me? I'm your enemy. Of course, I won't do anything before you attack. But I won't save you when you're in danger either. You can treat me as a spectator now. Just then, the terror demon suddenly spread its wings and slashed down at Chen Zhao's head with its giant sword. Chen Zhao clamped the sword between 2 fingers, making it hard for the demon to move. Do you know Patton? The demon's pupils constricted. Chen Zhao saw its gaze. Looks like I know him. Chen Zhao loosened his fingers, and the demon took 2 steps back. They're your enemies. At least, I won't do anything before you kill them. Chen Zhao wouldn't be kind enough to help them share the danger. Chen Zhao wanted all 4 of them to die. Suddenly, Brits launched a sneak attack at the demon with its back to him. The demon flapped its wings and blocked Brits's sneak attack. Tank. Don't hold back. Go all out, Brits warned. Tank exploded with 100% rage. In an instant, he turned into a 5-meter giant. He charged at the demon with all his might. The demon's expression changed slightly, and it slashed at Tank with its giant sword. But when the sword hit Tank's fist, not only did it not cut through Tank's fist, but it was deflected by Tank's fist energy instead. Tank roared and pounced, pinning the demon to the ground. 1 punch, another punch, and another punch. Tank attacked like crazy. Each of his punches carried a destructive power. He looks much stronger than last time, Chen Zhao thought. Seeing that it couldn't beat Tank, the demon immediately called for help. Hurry and save me. Just then Angelace, Brits, and Sam Mira each chose an opponent. They left the demon to Tank. Tank had become stronger, but his fighting style hadn't changed at all. It was still full of violence and madness. Chapter 1846. Brits was facing the demon that looked like Sadako alone. The white-clothed demon's figure was erratic. Once she moved, she slithered around like a snake. It was hard for Brits to catch her figure. It was as if she had no bones under her white clothes. Every time Brits shot a spell, it was about to hit. But the white-clothed demon could always twist into an unimaginable shape and avoid Brits's spells. Nevertheless, the white-clothed demon couldn't get close to Brits either. The two were in a strange stalemate. Or perhaps neither was using their full strength. On the other hand, Angelace and Sam Mira were working together to fight against the bewitching whip demon. The whip in the leather demon's hand waved in an impenetrable manner. When the whip landed on the ground, it tore a ghastly crack in the ground. Angelace and Sam Mira didn't dare to touch the whip at all. If they touched it, their skin and flesh would be cut off. Angelace's bow and crossbow seemed to be a part of her. Any movement, any angle could make a shooting motion. Moreover, every arrow was extremely accurate. Even the whip demon often had to rely on the whip to defend and block the crossbow bolts. Sam Mira summoned the blood spirit. The large amount of flesh here made her spell extremely powerful. The blood spirit was made of blood, but its appearance wasn't distorted. It looked more like a fierce red beast. The whip demon's whip swept across the blood spirit. It caused great damage to the blood spirit. But the blood spirit could recover in the blink of an eye. It had to be said that the environment here gave Sam Mira a home ground advantage. The battle between the tank and the sword-wielding terror demon was the most intense. The tank's rage grew and gradually suppressed the terror demons. The battle between the two messed up the entire theater. Neither side gave way to the other. Maeve watched in awe. It was different from the one-sided suppression before. The two were evenly matched, so the battle was especially intense. Maeve glanced at Chen Zhao again. She realized that he'd taken out a beer from somewhere and was drinking it. He was really watching the show. Aren't you going to help? No matter what grudges you had with them before. At least now you should be the enemy of those monsters. If they lose, you will have to face those terrible monsters alone, Maeve said. Chen Zhao glanced at Maeve. I hope they're all dead. Chen Zhao stated his goal honestly. It wasn't convenient for Chen Zhao to attack, but that didn't mean he didn't want them dead. If the four of them died here, it would be a huge blow to the psionic team. The battle seemed to be balanced, but in reality, it was not stable. As Tank's rage meter soared, his combat power also increased in a straight line. Pung! With a loud bang, Tank's fist smashed the terror demon's greatsword into pieces. At the same time, the terror demon was sent flying. Tank roared. He didn't chase after the terror demon first. Instead, he looked in Chen Zhao's direction. He seemed to have lost his mind, but in his mind, there was another voice reminding him. Suddenly Tank came to his senses. If it was in the past, tanks would definitely not be able to maintain their rationality when their rage level reached 80%. But now, when Tank's rage value was close to 90%, he actually regained his sanity. A crazed, mindless monster, an irrational monster, were two different concepts. Tank turned to look at the huge demon. The demon stood up. He was even taller than the transformed Tank. With a roar, Tank charged at the demon at a shocking speed. The giant demon raised its palm to block the Tank's brutal punch. He was much stronger than Tank. Tank's fist was grabbed by the demon, and then he swung it out. Tank's body was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into the wall behind him. Chen Zhao suddenly stood up. The demon's aura was very similar to King Kong's. They were both subordinates of the King of Power. Chen Zhao stared at the enormous demon, his eyes shining. King Kong had once said that if he wanted to strengthen his body, he had to gather the blood of 100 subordinates of the King of Power. He had to use the blood of the King of Power's subordinates to strengthen his body. The demon noticed Chen Zhao's gaze. That gaze made him uncomfortable. It was a naked desire. It was like a hunter and his prey. The demon had wanted to get rid of the other humans first. Then he would attack Chen Zhao. But Chen Zhao's gaze made him uncomfortable. Just now, Chen Zhao had caught the terror demon's sword with 2 fingers. It was clear that Chen Zhao was far more powerful than the terror demon. The demon felt that he was more powerful than the terror demon. But he had to be careful with Chen Zhao. The giant demon's body began to be covered with a layer of metallic skin, like indestructible armor. Chen Zhao suddenly took out a huge container and placed it on the ground. The demon stomped with both feet, bringing with it a gust of wind. Whoosh! Maeve felt like a mountain was pressing down on her. Whether it was her or Chen Zhao, they were like ants in front of that mountain. What the giant demon possessed was pure power. However, Chen Zhao was a bit surprised by the aura he had. It was so solid that Chen Zhao didn't understand. The aura seemed to increase the demon's power by 100 times. But the number of demons was still too low. 1 times 100 was still a world of difference from 10,000. Maeve's vision blurred. Then she saw the demon's arm break. The demon's body was pressed to the ground. Her eyes couldn't follow Chen Zhao's movements. Chen Zhao lifted the demon's severed arm and placed it on the container. Maeve felt her scalp go numb. Meanwhile, the battle on the other side had also changed due to the drastic changes here. No matter if it was the psionic team or the demons, they were all stunned as they looked at the gigantic demon that was instantly defeated. The demon was the strongest among them. It wasn't just a difference in power, but also in level. But the demon had been defeated so easily. They didn't even understand what had happened to the demon. Even the demon's brain was in a state of shock. It was an absolute and defenseless suppression. The demon struggled to stand up several times, but Chen Zhao pressed him back to the ground. His strength was being drained away, and his blood was being forced out. The more blood he lost, the stronger he was. "Can you tell me where your master is?" Chen Zhao asked in demon language. 9 Heavens, Divine Emperor. Chapter 1847. The huge demon looked up at Chen Zhao. "Looks like you don't want to tell me." Chen Zhao grabbed the demon's head and shoulder. "I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to tell me where your master is in Bermuda?" The huge demon closed its eyes, looking as if it would rather die than submit. "Fine." Maeve's pupils constricted. She saw Chen Zhao tear off the demon's head. Blood spurted out. Maeve was shocked. The huge demon's head suddenly opened its eyes in Chen Zhao's hand. It stared straight at Chen Zhao with a terrifying gaze. But Chen Zhao didn't care. The 4 psionic team members and the 3 demons on the other side all gasped. "Kill him," the terror demon roared. "Kill that human." His servants and big-headed demons swarmed toward Chen Zhao. Maeve saw the flood of demons and took a few steps back in fear. Chen Zhao raised his right arm. Holy light cannon. A white blast shot out from Chen Zhao's palm. Boom! In an instant, hundreds of big-headed demons were covered by the white blast and turned to dust. Only a few dozen large-headed evil demons managed to survive. Everyone was stunned. They stared at Chen Zhao in astonishment. Brits and the others knew that Chen Zhao was strong. They knew that Chen Zhao was stronger than all of them. But this time, their understanding of Chen Zhao was refreshed. Chen Zhao had a smile on his face. "I don't really want to get involved in your fight." Chen Zhao tossed the head in his left hand. "But if you really want me to get involved, I'm happy to." Britz's expression became even more serious. It wasn't because of the demon that looked like Sadako. It was because Chen Zhao was stronger than he'd imagined. Britz somewhat understood Vistana's attitude back then. The difference was so huge that it was hard to even think about fighting back. Chen Zhao actually wasn't in a good mood, because he'd helped the psionic team solve some problems. The remaining 3 demons weren't weak, but the psionic team members were strong too. In particular, the strength of the tank was clearly superior. Britz was still holding back. "So boring." Chen Zhao pouted. Putting away the blood container, he turned to leave. Seeing Chen Zhao leave, Maeve couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Chen Zhao had never attacked her. But with Chen Zhao by her side, she felt a lot of pressure. Moreover, Chen Zhao's attitude towards this hellish scene was indifferent. It made her feel very uncomfortable. But before Chen Zhao left, he made an opening at the bottom of the ship. The ship would slowly sink into the water. The next day he saw the news. A cruise ship sank in American territorial waters. As always, he covered it up. However, this was understandable. After all, if the public knew about the existence of the supernatural realm, they even learned that there were demons in their world. That would bring about social unrest. The panic of the people might even be used by those with ulterior motives. Chen Zhao understood this. However, just like the previous incident, it happened in the waters near Los Angeles. This was why Chen Zhao had always been unhappy. After all, Chen Zhao saw the entire L.A. area as his territory. Now there was a group of blind people causing trouble in the vicinity. This made Chen Zhao feel like he had been insulted. West, did you see the news about the cruise ship sinking in the waters near Los Angeles? Wait, I'll go take a look. Is there something wrong with the news? It was done by a group of demons. Their habitat is near Bermuda, Chen Zhao said. This isn't the first time they've caused trouble in the nearby waters. I've dealt with them 3 or 4 times. I don't know about this at all. The Anti-Terrorism Security Department must have kept this information and assigned it to the psionic team, Chen Zhao said. Last night, Chen Zhao told him what had happened last night, except for the game between him and the American Air Force. Are these guys trying to steal our rice bowls so blatantly? West sounded rather dissatisfied. What do you think? Chen Zhao asked. Are those demons in Bermuda? Yes, they should be in that area, but I'm not sure of the exact location. How strong are these demons? I think there are a few very powerful beings among these demons. There might even be some that are on par with me. Chen Zhao wasn't very sure. Then let the psionic team die, West said. If we leak this information to the government, they'll definitely give us a mission. With the Anti-Terrorism Security Department's personality, they'll definitely keep this mission. Are you sure this plan can trick the psionic team? Chen Zhao asked. Don't let us trick ourselves. Cover up some information. As long as they don't know the exact information and the demon's strength, I think the psionic team will be happy to steal our mission. Wes was indeed a sly old fox. He didn't feel guilty at all for doing such a ruthless thing. Anyway, you'll do it, Chen Zhao said. Don't let the government know that we're the ones behind this. Never go against the government. The Anti-Terrorism Security Department was far from the government. At noon, Stephen arrived at Chen Zhao's moon villa. 2 of his bodyguards came along with him. Wow, Princess Chen? Is she princess? Stephen exclaimed as he looked at the huge princess. He was already used to the princess form in the past. He wasn't that shocked. But now Princess was twice as big as before. Stephen stood in front of the princess with a body as big as a hill. He could feel the oppressive aura emanating from the princess. What did almost 3,000 kilograms mean? It was almost the weight of an adult Asian elephant. Of course, Princess wasn't even as big as an Asian elephant. This was mainly because Princess muscles were tighter. But it was still shocking. Stephen's 2 bodyguards, Frank and Fantis, were also shocked. Chun, how did Princess become so big? She's been eating a lot lately, Chen Zhao said. Stephen rolled his eyes. But he knew that Chen Zhao had secrets. Can Princess handle those crocodiles? Raymond is enough, Chen Zhao said. Although the princess had been reborn, there was still a fundamental gap between her and Raymond. Also, Princess has to take care of her child. Don't bring her. Raymond can handle those crocodiles. Chapter 1848. How about we bring Briar and Bramble too? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. Have Princess deal with the crocodiles and bring Briar and Bramble. Those 2 are good at causing trouble. Have them deal with the crocodiles. Don't get eaten by them. Fine. Actually, I want to bring Princess, Briar and Bramble to my house. I'll call Raymond out. Oh, what car did you drive? Chen Zhao asked. Big truck. Sure, no problem. Chen Zhao clapped his hands. Raymond shot out of the grass like a bolt of lightning. Even though Frank and Fantis had seen Raymond before, they were still shocked by his appearance. Stephen took Raymond away. Chen Zhao also told Raymond to do what he needed to do. After dropping Raymond off on Stephen's land, Fantis and Frank were a bit worried. They didn't dare to open Raymond. After all, Chen Zhao wasn't here. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and open the truck. Mr. Stephen, that snake won't eat us, right? After all, Mr. Chen isn't here. Don't worry, Stephen said nonchalantly. I'm very close to Raymond. He even slept in my arms when he was young. Okay, Mr. Stephen. If that snake is in danger, you have to protect us. Frank pulled open the door of the container, and Raymond jumped out. Raymond's huge body made all of Frank's hair stand on end. Raymond's tail swung at Frank. Ah! Frank was slapped to the ground. Haha! Raymond, sorry. He didn't mean to say bad things about you. Stephen went up and touched Raymond's body. Raymond lowered his head and let Stephen touch him. Raymond had clearly done it on purpose. Raymond, I'll leave this place to you, Stephen said. Raymond nodded and slipped into the bushes. Frank got up gloomily and returned to Stephen's side. Mr. Stephen, Fantas also said why that snake only wants to take revenge on me? Fantas knows Raymond, Stephen said matter-of-factly. Fine. Fantas thought of the night he stayed over at Chen Zhao's house. When Stephen was running for his life, she had escorted him to Chen Zhao's house in the middle of the night. And she saw with her own eyes that Raymond tore the monster that was chasing after Stephen into pieces. It was not a pleasant memory. Mr. Stephen, can that guy really handle so many crocodiles? Suddenly, a 5-meter-long crocodile descended from the sky. He landed right in front of Frank. The crocodile's neck had been broken, and the angle of its head and body was very uncoordinated. However, when he suddenly landed in front of Frank, the three of them were startled. Frank, don't you think you should be more careful with your words? Frank wanted to cry. Mr. Stephen, is that guy so vengeful? Right, Raymond has killed people before. Stephen patted Frank's shoulder. Snakes are very vengeful. I heard that in Africa, reticulated pythons will take revenge on the local natives. There was a real incident where the partner of a reticulated python was killed by a native, and that reticulated python killed a dozen people from that tribe in one night. Famutus added fuel to the fire. Uncle Kalon and I plan to go to England the day after tomorrow. Xianli stood before Chen Zhao, looking a bit reserved. Did you find any clues? Chen Zhao asked. There's a clue. We found out that the original owner of the Book of Prometheus was a man called Aaron Lebos. In 1970, he donated the Book of Prometheus to the British Museum. Now that he's already 98 years old, perhaps he doesn't even need to steal from the British Museum to find out about the contents of the Book of Prometheus from Aaron Lebos. Xianli said. Chen Zhao thought about it and nodded. Take this credit card. Chen Zhao had prepared this credit card a long time ago. He could check the credit card's spending records anytime and anywhere. So as long as Xianli wanted to spend money, Chen Zhao could roughly know their whereabouts. Of course, this was apart from the credit card. More Lisa and Ruan Faxben would also report their whereabouts in real time. Thank you, Uncle. Come back safely. Chen Zhao hugged Xianli. Okay. Golden apple? Chen Zhao really wanted to know if the golden apple was actually edible. But he also knew that in the magic world, many things that sounded like food actually had nothing to do with food. Uncle, can I go on adventures in the future? Dadaira looked at Chen Zhao with watery eyes. Chen Zhao's face twitched. If you're stronger than Xianli, I'll let you go on adventures. As a parent, they wanted to keep their child by their side for the rest of their lives. Because all parents thought that their child was a child that hadn't grown up. No matter how old the child was, they all thought so. For example, Xianli was going to find some golden apple. How much preparation had Chen Zhao done? Any parent would do the same. Chen Zhao really wanted to find the golden apple himself. Then he went to the headquarters. He found Lisa, Moore and Ruan Faxben to ask them about their preparations. They'd all prepared some equipment and large amounts of medicine. At the same time, Chen Zhao warned them to prioritize safety. President, I've finished the magic tool you asked me to make last time, Ruan Faxben said. Over the past few days, he had been working hard and finally completed the magic tool that Chen Zhao had requested. Ruan Faxi was very curious about who designed the design of the magic tool. It was definitely a design that surpassed genius. He couldn't even imagine how exquisite it was. If he hadn't seen the design, Ruan Faxben would be a frog at the bottom of a well. Only after seeing it did he understand how vast the world was. Although he'd completed the tool according to the design, it didn't mean that he was at the same level. Design was design, manufacturing was manufacturing. He was just a high-level worker. The truly powerful person was the one who designed the tool. That was someone that he couldn't compare to or reach. Take me to see, Chen Zhao said. Ruan Faxben brought Chen Zhao to his lab. Chen Zhao saw that Nur was locked in his lab. Nur was still glaring at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao ignored Nur's gaze. Ruan Faxben pressed a few keys on the lab's wall. The wall opened. There was a metal ball about 2 meters in diameter inside. It was covered in protrusions. Is this it? Chapter 1849. Chen Zhao lifted the metal ball with one hand. Gurnier sucked in a cold breath. So strong. This magic tool wasn't much in the eyes of humans. But to demons, it was a terrifying demon-slaying weapon. Of course, the core of the weapon hadn't been installed yet. The angelic crystal was the true core. Ruan Fashaben had only made the outer shell. Chen Zhao put the weapon away. Then he looked at Gunil. She seems to be in good condition. Gunil was chained up in the lab like a dog. However, her arrogance made her unwilling to yield even in the face of despair. Ruan Fashaben looked at Gunil. Gunil, if you can't control your gaze again, maybe I'll use your eyeballs for an experiment. Gunil lowered her head, avoiding Chen Zhao and Ruan Fashaben's gazes. Chen Zhao and Ruan Fashaben walked out of the lab. I heard she's related to you? Chen Zhao asked. Ruan Fashaben was already prepared for this question. There were no secrets in the headquarters. When he'd asked Gunil last time, they'd talked about how the matter would spread. It was only a matter of time before it reached Chen Zhao's ears. If there's no accident, she should be my daughter, Ruan Fashaben said. Your daughter? Chen Zhao looked at Ruan in surprise. Why was this different from what he'd heard? The daughter of my student and I, Ruan Fashaben said. Ruan Faxburn said. She was my former student Afuman. We had sex. And then one day, Afuman found out that I wanted to do research on her. So she ran away pregnant. Chen Zhao's face darkened. Ruan Fashaben was really despicable. He'd used his student woman and the mother of his child as an experiment. President, I didn't want to do anything, Ruan Fashaben said helplessly. I just want to take some blood and skin tissue. It won't hurt her at all. She's thinking too much. You've never thought about getting them back? Yes, but she's purposely avoiding me. What can I do? Ruan Fashaben said helplessly. My connections are limited. I can't find them either. Then what do we do with her? Chen Zhao asked. Let's lock him up for now. Ruan sighed. Send her to the dungeon, Chen Zhao said. At least the conditions there are not bad. Just then, Chen Zhao looked in the direction of the lab. She doesn't seem to be well behaved. Didn't you chain her tightly? Ruan Faxburn scratched his head. The lock was randomly found. Gurnier poked his head out and glanced at both ends of the corridor. In the end, he happened to see Chen Zhao and Ruan Faxaben standing in the corridor. Gurnier immediately returned to the lab and broke through the window. Gurnier somersaulted in the air, kneeled on one knee, and landed steadily on the ground. Just then Jindra walked over. Gatkala looked at the broken window on the second floor, then at Gunil. Did you go the wrong way? Gunil charged straight at Jinkira and attacked without saying a word. Gage lifted his leg and kicked Neil in the stomach. Gatkira had the bloodline of a berserker and was several times stronger than ordinary people in his normal state. Neil rolled a few times on the ground and stood up again. Just then, she revealed a bracer on her wrist. She'd stolen this bracer from Ruan Faxaben's lab. She'd seen Ruan Faxaben use this bracer before. Neil pressed a button on the bracer. Instantly, a screen of light shot out from the bracer and enveloped Gatkira. But before it could land on Gatkira, the screen disappeared. Chen Zhao and Ruan Faxaben looked down at Neil from the window. Your bracer doesn't seem to be very useful. This gauntlet needs to be infused with magic. Where did she get the magic? Since it needs mana, how did she activate it? It should be her pain power. I didn't think that it could be activated too. Gurnier cursed in exasperation. It was at this moment that Gatella rushed over again. Uppercut, left hook, right hook, mystical dragon tail whip. A series of consecutive moves directly beat Gurnier to the point where he couldn't even tell which way was north. However, Neil, who had the primordial bloodline, stood up again. Gunil then took out a large piece of bright red cloth from his bosom and covered his body. In the blink of an eye, Gurnier disappeared from where he stood. Oh, a magic item that can turn invisible. Chen Zhao was surprised. Ruan Faxaben shook his head. This invisibility cloak is good for ordinary people, but it's much worse than Osalice's invisibility. Osalice's invisibility can even completely cover one's aura. We can equip Klaus and the others. If we equip them, we need to consider putting a mana source. Otherwise, they won't be able to use it at all. Neil was originally invisible. However, Jankira punched the air, and Gyunil immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. Neil also found it unbelievable that Jankira could attack her while she was invisible. Neil didn't understand at all. After entering the Tower of Trials, they faced hundreds and thousands of monsters. They needed to predict the monsters' attacks and sense their attack patterns. If they couldn't do these two things, they wouldn't even be able to pass the first level. Jankira's main job was to forge weapons, but that didn't mean that she was weak. Of course, Gatkila's battle prowess was among the bottom few in the entire association. But if she couldn't even deal with Neil, then she should find a place to slit her own throat. Seeing that invisibility was useless against Jankira, Neil could only put away the cloak. She realized that using the cloak continuously made her weaker and weaker. Neil took out a crystal ball the size of a ping-pong ball. Ruan, how many magic items did you give her? President, my things are all in the lab. How would I know how many she took? Ruan Faxabin was frustrated too, because he usually left large amounts of magic items and materials in the lab. He didn't even know how many things were in the lab. Neil smashed the crystal ball on the ground. The black gas in the crystal ball enveloped Neil. Genji threw a punch, but when his fist landed on Gurnier's body, it felt like he was punching air. What's the effect of the crystal ball? Chapter 1850. That's a temporary mist crystal, Ruan said. It can be temporarily immune to physical attacks. Immune to physical attacks? Chen Zhao tilted his head and glanced at Ruan. Of course not completely. Ruan Faxi didn't want to let Chen Zhao try. As the creator of this fog crystal, Ruan Faxi knew the limits of this fog crystal. Generally speaking, spiritualists who possessed atomization or other elemental magic could reassemble their bodies, even if they were physically attacked, or if their atomization form was scattered. However, the ability obtained from the mist crystal couldn't gather again. If a physical attack exceeded a certain level, the mist form would scatter, and the body would be severely injured. To put it simply, the mist crystal's ability was a weakened version of true elemental spells. Of course, elemental spells weren't truly invincible. There were countless ways to counter elemental spells. For example, Chen Zhao's mouth of gluttony could directly devour elements. It could directly pose a fatal threat to the user. However, Chen Zhao's level was overwhelming. Another example was Jalanash's elemental spells, which were the bane of elemental spells. This was an elemental counter. Elemental spells had strong physical resistance. However, their magic resistance was greatly reduced. For example, if a person used water or mist form, and the opponent threw a curse at them, they would basically take as much damage as they could. The magic damage would even be several times higher than the original damage. Thus, elemental spells were also very lacking. Realizing that his attack was useless, Jankira's fist suddenly became hot, and he reached into the mist. Neil screamed and the mist effect disappeared. Jankira was the weakest in the association, but he was more than enough to deal with Neil. Even if Neil stole Ruan's various magic tools, it was useless. The difference in power was obvious. If Neil used her ancient bloodline to take Jankira's attack head-on, she might have a chance to escape. However, she had to use all sorts of magic tools that she wasn't familiar with. Most of them were weakened versions of traditional spells. How could she deal with Jankira? Neil vomited a few mouthfuls of blood. That punch hadn't hurt her physically, but the heat. Gurnier knelt on one knee, even though she was injured. She was injured, but it also provided her with the power of pain. Gurnier patted his shoes. Suddenly, Gyunil felt weightless. The moment she took a step forward, Gurnier had already traveled more than 10 meters. Jankira's eyes widened. So fast. Ner finally understood. Fight Gaekla or anyone else in the society. She didn't have the slightest chance of winning, so she decided to run away. It was all thanks to Ruan Faxbin's experiments in the lab that he didn't avoid her. Ner could feel that the pain was decreasing rapidly, The ability to move as if he was flying was very refreshing. But it couldn't be maintained for too long. At this moment, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky without any warning. Bang! Gurnier was struck in the head by the lightning and was instantly blasted away. He stood up with difficulty. All of the magic tools on Gurnier's body had failed. Gurnier wobbled and turned to look at Chen Zhao and Ruan Faxburn on the windowsill. "Come on, kill me. Kill me if you dare." Gurnier roared furiously. In an instant, the originally calm dark clouds in the sky flashed with lightning and thunder. Rumble! Between the dark clouds, there was a terrifying thunderstorm. In the blink of an eye, the headquarters of the society seemed to be enveloped by the apocalypse. The atmosphere was so heavy that everyone felt suffocated. A terrifying bolt of lightning descended from the sky, but it didn't just flash by. Instead, it streaked across the ground, leaving a scorching chasm. It charged toward Gurnier. Gurnier finally felt the threat of death. The bolt of lightning was too terrifying. It was more terrifying than she could imagine. At that moment, all of her confidence, courage, and pride turned into nothingness. "I admit defeat. I admit defeat." Rumble. The lightning finally stopped before Gurnier, but all of its energy was released in that instant. A huge pit appeared in the ground. The surrounding ground was scorched too. Gurnier was blasted away by the explosion. Ruan Faxben was quite annoyed too. After all, Gurnier was his daughter. Chen Zhao had scolded his daughter in front of him. What could he do? Luckily, Chen Zhao didn't kill him. Ruan Faxben started to complain. Even if Gurnier wanted to escape, she should have chosen a time when Chen Zhao wasn't there. Escape when Chen Zhao was at the headquarters. Was that any different from suicide? In the headquarters, Chen Zhao was like a god. Nothing could escape Chen Zhao's eyes. Ruan Faxben walked before Gurnier. "Follow me." Gurnier stood up with difficulty and followed silently. Ruan Faxben brought Gurnier to the dungeon. A few rooms in the dungeon were already occupied. Morez stood before one of the glass rooms and talked to the occupant inside. The connected cells were all occupied by her former companions. Morez would basically visit them every day. Only half a year had passed of their 3-year sentence. But they'd basically accepted reality now. Ruan Faxben pointed at an empty glass cell and said to Gurnier, "Go in." "How long are you going to lock me up for?" "Until I think you can come out," Ruan Faxben said. "Give me an exact time." "There's no exact time," Ruan Faxben said. Ruan Faxben said, "You shouldn't have chosen to run away now. You've wasted a chance. This is your only chance." Gurnier frowned. She suddenly realized that Ruan Faxben had let her go on purpose. That lock was specially prepared for her by Ruan Faxben, and even the magic equipment was deliberately shown to her. "Give me another chance. I won't make the same mistake twice." "No chance." Ruan Faxben shook his head. "You've already wasted your only chance. The president won't allow you to escape again, nor will he allow me to let you go again. I know a human's information. What I want to know is more information, more accurate information, not vague and uncertain information. Let me out and I'll tell you." "Gurnier, you don't have any other choice," Ruan Faxben said. Ruan Faxben said, "Forget it. We'll talk when you're willing to talk. Just calm down here." Chapter 1851. "Portia, take care of the house," Chen Zhao said. "Boss, where are you going?" "Xian Li's going to travel around the world," Chen Zhao said, pushing his suitcase. "I'm going to send her off." "Boss, I can't take care of so many kids by myself." Portia's face was filled with reluctance. She'd only been to Japan once in her 20 years, and she'd gone with Chen Zhao. In the end, she owed a huge sum of money in Japan, and even encountered the once-in-a-thousand-years Mount Fuji eruption. How old was Xian Li? She'd be able to travel around the world. Chen Zhao glanced at Portia and narrowed his eyes. "Oh, you asked me for a day and a half off a few days ago, right?" "Boss, I got it. I'll take care of the kids." "Good girl." Chen Zhao finally smiled in satisfaction. "Oh, how was your audition a few days ago?" Portia turned her head away, not wanting to answer the question. Although she had Steven's introduction, her performance in the audition studio was too poor. The result was obvious. She'd lost the role. Sometimes, even Stephen's face didn't matter when he was being cheated. What face did Stephen have? It could even be said that Stephen could recommend a secondary role with just a word. It could be said that if Stephen wanted to recommend a secondary character, it would only take a word from him. This also showed how low Portia's acting standards were. It's okay. I'll ask Stephen for a recommendation next time. Portia was instantly filled with energy. Boss, don't worry. I'll take good care of your kids. Let's go, Exionly. Exionly didn't have much luggage. 2 not-so-big suitcases were filled. When Chun Zhao and Exionly arrived at the airport, Fei Lai ran over too. She was supposed to be at Angel Beach. A while later, Risa, Moore and Ruan Fashaban arrived one after another. Then Kalon arrived too. Ruan, where's your luggage? Chun Zhao looked at the empty-handed Ruan Fashaban. Most of my luggage is contraband, so I chose to check it through other channels, Ruan Fashaban said. You sure know how to be lazy. Exionly, be careful. Fei Lai hugged Exionly. Yes, Auntie Fei Lai. Exionly had always known, even though they weren't her real parents. But their concern for her was genuine. Ever since Exionly decided to go on an adventure, Chun Zhao and Fei Lai had never said that they would try to find the golden apple. They only had one request, and that was to be safe. They had patiently repeated this request countless times. That was a request, or even a request, that only a family member would make. When you come back, our whole family will search for the legendary treasure island. Auntie Fei Lai, I'll come back safely. Chun Zhao was on the other side, his arm resting on Lisa's shoulder. If anything happens to Exionly, I will send the 3 of you to hell. I mean what I say. Risa and Ruan Faxi suddenly regretted instigating Exionly in the first place. Moore, on the other hand, was innocent. He wasn't involved in Risa and Ruan's conspiracy at all. All right, your flight is about to arrive. Go into the departure lounge. Chun Zhao and Fei Lai sent the 5 to the departure lounge and watched as they entered. Fei Lai, do you still have to work today? I have to go back to the coastal rescue team. I asked Robio for 3 hours of leave. Okay, I'll send you back. No need, Fei Lai said. Go to the supermarket and buy some things. We're almost out of daily necessities. There were many people in the house, so things were consumed quickly. Okay, be careful. After leaving the airport, Chun Zhao called Andrews first. Andrews, I need to withdraw some cash, $200,000. I'll go get it now. Help me prepare it. Chun Zhao often used cash, so he always kept some cash at home. This was the benefit of being a top client of the bank. He didn't need to make an appointment to withdraw large amounts of cash. If it was 2 years ago, Chun Zhao would need to make an appointment to withdraw $10,000. When Chun Zhao arrived at the bank, Amira knew that Chun Zhao was coming, so she came looking for him at the right time. Chun, do you want to come to my office? Business or private? Chun Zhao asked. It's not a big deal. Amira shrugged. My father's construction site is about to be completed. He heard that you Chinese are all good at feng shui, so he wants to ask you to check it. Ever since that incident, Amira's father Depp believed in such things. After hearing about feng shui, he wanted to ask Chun Zhao to check it out for him. I don't know how. You don't? I can introduce you to an expert in this area, Chun Zhao said. Also, the person I'm introducing is very skilled. His fees aren't as crazy as mine. All right, give me his contact information. Chun Zhao gave Li Qing's number to Amira. Oh, be more respectful to this person, Chun Zhao said seriously. She's my teacher. Chun Zhao wasn't worried about Amira's attitude. Amira always had a professional smile and attitude to everyone. She definitely wouldn't let Li Qing suffer. But Amira's father Depp was a jerk. An arrogant, rude bastard. After hearing that this person was Chun Zhao's teacher, Amira also became serious. Don't worry, I won't mistreat your teacher. Is the cash ready? Chun Zhao asked. Yes. I'll have Andrews send it over. A while later, Andrews came with the money. Mr. Chun, here's the cash you withdrew. Please count it. Chun Zhao nodded and turned to Amira. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. After leaving the office and passing by the bank, Chun Zhao saw a figure. It was KG Sayer. KG Sayer also saw Chen Zhao. The two glanced at each other and saw the displeasure in each other's eyes. Chen Zhao thought for a moment. Should he greet that woman? Forget it. He wasn't familiar with her at all. Suddenly 6 masked people came in from the bank. The first to react was the bank's security guard. But before he could do anything, a gun was already pressed against his temple. Don't react. Please cooperate. It's fun. A masked man fired a volley of bullets from above. Clatter, clatter. Raise your hands and get on the ground. You're facing a robbery. Please don't give me a reason to kill you. Chapter 1852. Chen Zhao immediately laid on the ground and covered his head with his hands. KG Sayer's face was full of mockery, but just then a masked robber walked up. The gun but smashed heavily on KG Sayer's neck. Lie down and cover your head. KG Sayer stumbled and fell to the ground. KG Sayer was both shocked and furious, but the situation was against her, so she could only lie on the ground obediently. KG Sayer turned to look at Chen Zhao. She realized that Chen Zhao was looking at her with a mocking expression. KG Sayer was furious. What's there to be proud of? By now the bank was completely under control. More than a dozen bank staff and customers had become hostages. 2 masked robbers armed with automatic rifles were watching over a dozen hostages. Then the bank's counter door was opened. One had to know that it could only be opened from inside. This meant that there was a mole among the bank staff. These robbers were too professional. In a minute, they'd already taken out 2 boxes from the bank's vault. Chen Zhao lay on the ground and looked at the masked robbers who'd come out from the backstage. 2 boxes? These 2 boxes could hold a few $1,000,000. But Chen Zhao felt that they'd only gotten so little money after such a big fight. It was really child's play. The inside of the 2 boxes seemed to be wrapped in aluminum. Even Chen Zhao's little world couldn't sense what was in the boxes. But they probably hadn't been taken out from the vault. Instead, they'd been taken out from the safe. Their target wasn't the cash. It made sense. This was Citibank's regional headquarters. If they wanted to rob cash, they wouldn't be able to get much with so few people. With their professional methods, it would be easier for them to rob a branch with a weaker defense, and they would be able to rob more money. Just then, Chen Zhao realized that the police had arrived. Oh no, the police are here. Our escape route is blocked. A masked robber had been guarding the window outside, monitoring the situation outside. Just then Chen Zhao's phone rang. He picked it up. Hello, Fei Lai. Oh, we've run out of female products. Remember to buy some when you go to the supermarket later. Okay, I'll try my best. I'm in the bank now, but I'm robbed. Hang up the phone now. Hang up now. The 2 masked robbers guarding the hostages both pointed their guns at him. Let's not talk about it now. The robbers are pointing their guns at me now. Alright, don't take too long. When KG Sayer looked at Chen Zhao, she looked at him as if he was crazy. This fellow is seeking death, isn't he? As soon as Chen Zhao hung up, another call came in. Don't answer the phone. The masked robber stood before Chen Zhao and pointed the gun at his head. Chen Zhao looked at the masked robber and said matter-of-factly, "Let's understand each other. I'm not going to tell anyone. Don't answer the phone. Do you want to die?" But the threat didn't stop Chen Zhao from picking up the phone. Hang up. Hang up now. The masked robber's voice grew louder. I'm going to shoot. Hey, Chen, are you in the office? It was Amira who called him. Yeah, I'm being held hostage right now, Chen Zhao said helplessly. The robber is pointing a gun at my head. Are you kidding? I'm serious. Chen Zhao opened the video chat. Look. Take care of them, Amira said. The thing they want is very important. Is it okay if I kill them by accident? It's okay. They're robbers. Oh, take care of the bank's surveillance too. Just then, the masked robber loaded his gun. The other hostages didn't dare to look up. Just as the robber was about to shoot, Chen Zhao attacked without any warning. He grabbed the automatic rifle. Before the robber could react, his hand was empty. The gun was already in Chen Zhao's hand. Bang! Chen Zhao raised the gun and smashed it into the robber's face with the butt. The other robber's reaction wasn't slow. He quickly turned his gun toward Chen Zhao. Groin kick. Chen Zhao lifted the gun with one hand and kicked with the other. The two robbers guarding the hostages fell to the ground. Chen Zhao raised the gun and fired at the remaining 4 robbers. Da-da-da. The 4 masked robbers immediately hid behind pillars and bunkers. All the bullets missed. Chen Zhao threw away the rifle in anger. As expected, he was cursed by the bullets. The hostages didn't even dare to look up. They trembled in the gunshots. Chen Zhao had already appeared behind a pillar. Da-da-da. Ah. Da-da-da. Ah. The 4 robbers were all beaten to the ground. Chen Zhao picked up the phone. Amira, it's done. Amira was speechless. 30 seconds. In just 30 seconds, the bank crisis was solved. The police broke in. Chen Zhao stood there with his hands raised. A few policemen surrounded him with their guns. Hands on your head and get on the ground. Sometimes the police were no different from robbers. Stop, he's not a robber. Amira had already followed the police in. Chen Zhao and Amira exchanged glances. Amira glanced at the 2 boxes beside Chen Zhao. She opened the boxes and checked the contents. Chen Zhao saw many documents in the boxes. Judging from Amira's nervous expression, the documents were clearly very important. By now, the police had already learned what had happened from the hostages. Most of the hostages didn't dare to look up, but they could still vaguely see Chen Zhao's actions. The police were shocked by Chen Zhao's abilities, but they didn't make things difficult for him. After all, he'd defeated 6 armed robbers by himself. He was basically like the main characters in movies. Is there anything missing? No. Thank you, Chen. Amira heaved a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, Chen Zhao was here this time. Otherwise, she'd be in great trouble. The police came over and asked a few more questions. Chen Zhao answered them truthfully. He also explained how he'd dealt with the 6 robbers. Of course, the police didn't watch the surveillance, so they couldn't know the exact process. KG Sayer was also being interviewed. She glanced at Chen Zhao from afar. She was also shocked by Chen Zhao's abilities. At the beginning, she'd seen Chen Zhao lying on the ground so decisively. She'd thought that Chen Zhao was really a coward. In the end, Chen Zhao shocked everyone with a single move. Just now, she'd secretly watched Chen Zhao's counterattack. The entire process had been too fast. First, he'd killed the 2 robbers guarding the hostages. Then, he'd forced the remaining 4 robbers behind cover with his gun. Finally, he'd finished them off like a tornado. Chapter 1853. In a luxurious manner, a fat man in a nightgown looked at the man with a mustache in front of him. Failed? Joseph asked in surprise. That's not possible. Didn't you say you were professionals? We've never failed a commission before. The mustache Jack said calmly. The plan was going well, but there was a very powerful person among the hostages. He beat the expert I hired by himself. Who? Joseph asked with a frown. Don't worry about who he is. He's not part of the plan, Jack said calmly. Jax knew Joseph's personality. He probably wanted to take revenge. Jax didn't care who Joseph wanted to take revenge on. But the premise was that it didn't affect his plan. And someone who was able to kill 6 militants. He must be very powerful. Jax didn't like to involve this kind of enemy. Tell me who stopped me? Joseph asked relentlessly. That's not part of my plan, Jax said coldly. I need that person's information. If you want to take revenge on that person, then you can investigate it yourself, Jax said. Are you trying to shirk responsibility for your failure? Joseph looked at Jax in annoyance. He was the employer, but Jax didn't respect him at all. He still faced him with that indifferent attitude. Jax still didn't move, although he wasn't happy about it. But he still stuck to his principles. Commissions always came first. Pulling a person with great combat power to the opposite side. It was very likely to bring about unpredictable variables. Jax also investigated the other party's identity. The other party was rich, a very rich person. In this country, having money meant having great influence and power. It was already difficult to get the documents from the Citibank safe. Adding a powerful enemy would make the problem even worse. Then I'll leave it to you now. I want you to kill the guy who gave me trouble, Joseph said. That person is rich, maybe even richer than you, Jax said. Do you know what will happen if you kill a super rich person like that? Oh, rich? Joseph narrowed his eyes. Then kidnap him or his family. Jax didn't answer. Kidnapping didn't need a commission. And who would pay the ransom for a commission? Count as a client? In that case, they might as well complete the kidnapping themselves. What if the client paid less than the ransom? Therefore, when it came to kidnapping, they would either do it themselves or not do it at all. Moreover, the impact of kidnapping a super-rich person or his family was too bad. This would cause the entire upper class to unite against a common enemy. After all, no one was willing to put themselves or their family's safety at risk. How much ransom could a super-rich person extort? Tens of millions of dollars was already the limit. After all, most of the rich people's assets were mostly real estate, not cash. It was unwise to go against a group for tens of millions of dollars. Moreover, there was still Joseph, who was greedy by nature. The commission he offered would definitely not be higher than the ransom. Joseph was very famous in the industry, even if he wasn't one. Joseph also had a nickname in the industry, Hyena. They specialized in embezzling other people's assets. As long as he could achieve his goal, he didn't mind using any means. Jax had worked with Joseph twice before. Joseph was a bad guy in the truest sense of the word. Every one of his money was bloody. After succeeding a few times in a row, Joseph's net worth skyrocketed, and his assets exceeded $1 billion USD. This also made him more and more complacent. Jax, on the other hand, knew the risks involved. Therefore, he always made his choices very carefully. Not every target was suitable to be their prey. A person who fought back against 6 armed men, and a super-rich person at that. Using such a person as prey, he and Joseph would probably die a horrible death. Therefore, Jax always refused. If the target was someone who won the lottery and became rich overnight, Jax was willing to use the other person as prey, because even if the other person was rich, his influence was very limited. As for the super-rich who had great influence, even if he kidnapped his family and extorted tens of millions of dollars. But what next? Kill the hostage? Or not kill the hostage? No matter what he decided, the consequences would be very serious. Joseph saw that Jax wasn't happy, and his face darkened. He didn't like people disobeying his orders. Jax, are you going to refuse my commission? How much can you pay? Jax asked. 20 million. I've always been very generous to my own people. If you can get 200 million from that person, I'll give you another 20 million. Joseph said as if he was generous. I'm sorry, I refuse. Jax refused without hesitation. Only an idiot would accept such an arduous and unrewarding task. Jax, are you really going to refuse my kindness? Do you know the consequences of this? Joseph, I know you better than anyone else. Jax said indifferently. Jax said indifferently. I know your background, your personality, and everything about you. So please don't threaten me. It won't do you any good. Joseph's face stiffened, and his cheeks twitched. Indeed, they had worked together many times, and Jax had too many secrets that could be used against him. Joseph's gaze towards Jax became a bit darker. He didn't like people who couldn't be controlled. It seemed that after this, their cooperation would end. He had to get rid of Jax and his team. Haha. Jax, I'm just joking with you. Fine, as you said. Don't cause any more trouble before we get the documents. Joseph changed his expression again, and his attitude became broad-minded. If there's nothing else, I'll leave now. Jax turned around and left, not bothering to talk to Joseph at all. After leaving Joseph's manor, several of his men immediately surrounded him. Boss. Jax nodded and said, Get ready. After this mission, don't contact this mad dog again. There's already a rift between us. Boss, I've heard some news. What news? My friends said that Los Angeles is very dangerous. It's said that in the last 2 years, more than 5 top mercenary groups have disappeared here, and at least 20 killers have gone missing. Chapter 1854. What's going on? Jax frowned. I don't know. Anyway, Los Angeles has become a forbidden place for mercenaries and killers. The local gangs warned us to either leave as soon as possible, or stay in Los Angeles. Could it be that the local gangs are deliberately mystifying things? No, I've investigated. It's true. the subordinate said seriously. More than 200 people are missing. Is there no more information? According to the local gang's speculation, there might be a new power in Los Angeles. This power is very territorial and doesn't like outsiders doing missions in Los Angeles. Looks like we have to be careful, Jax said seriously. After all, we're outsiders. Jax had encountered such an organization or force before. Under normal circumstances, Jax would leave with his men. After all, a powerful dragon could not suppress a local snake. Moreover, it was not suitable to have a conflict with a local power without knowing the other party's background. Rather, they would rather have a conflict with the local gangs. They did not want to have a conflict with an armed group. Gangs and armed groups were two completely different concepts. Gangs, including the mafia, no matter what form they existed in, had a relatively loose internal structure. There were very few people who could be armed. Most of them had light weapons, or no weapons at all. Even some of the armed forces were amateurs. Just like the gangsters in the movies where they could equip any kind of weapon, it was impossible to appear in reality. At least for a stable regime, it was impossible to allow such gangs to exist. However, some organizations and forces were different. They had much more powerful armed forces. Moreover, they might have connections with the government. Some organizations or forces were even formed by the government. They existed for a certain purpose. Therefore, if you offended them, the revenge you would receive would be extremely strong. No one wanted to have a conflict with such organizations. Even a professional team like Jax would not. Is there any local government department? Anti-terrorism security department, the subordinate said. Anti-terrorism security department. Jax frowned. Let's keep a low profile and try not to do anything ourselves. What about this mission? Try to find local people. We won't do anything. Got it. How was the bank robbery today? Feilai asked. It's quite boring. Chen Zhao shrugged. Those people aren't real professionals. They look more like pawns arranged by someone. In the beginning, Chen Zhao saw how fast they were. In just a minute, they had taken control of the situation in the bank. He thought they were professionals. In the end, they realized that they were only well-trained at best. He should be a retired soldier, but he was far from being an elite. Be it in terms of awareness or strength, they were quite average. Someone must be controlling them from behind the scenes. Even the spies in the bank were arranged by the people behind the scenes. They were just following the plan. Once Chen Zhao, who was not part of the plan, appeared, they didn't know what to do, especially when Chen Zhao answered the call. They couldn't make up their minds to shoot. This meant that they were not the kind of people who would kill indiscriminately. He was probably short on cash and wanted to earn some extra income. Then he was hired to participate in this robbery. During the whole robbery, they did not kill anyone. This meant that they still had their own bottom line. Of course, this couldn't be a reason for them to get off scot-free. Amelia should know the truth, since the other party was here for the documents. And Amelia's reaction showed that he cared about the documents. This meant that Amelia knew the other party's identity. After dinner, Chen Zhao picked up his phone and called Amelia. Amelia, who's the person behind the bank robberies today? A robber who made his fortune by killing and robbing, Amelia said calmly. Those documents are a rich man's inheritance. Before he died, he gave his real estate to the bank for safekeeping. That person has his eyes on the inheritance. If I steal these documents, I can get the inheritance? Chen Zhao asked, confused. Some of the legal issues involved are very complicated. To put it simply, he only needs to destroy these documents, and then he can deny the bank the right to safekeep. Then, he can establish a relationship with one of the rich man's blood descendants and have the right to take over the inheritance. That rich man should have a law firm, right? There should be legal notarization for this kind of safekeeping, right? Yes, but these documents are key. Right now, the bank is in a lawsuit with the rich man's family. If these documents are lost, the bank will be in a passive position. That person's methods are extremely despicable. Kidnapping, threatening, killing, framing. As long as he can get the inheritance, he'll do anything, Amelia said. Amira said, by the way, you'd better be careful. After all, you've unwittingly gotten involved in this matter. Although you're not afraid, You still have your family. You'd better be wary of them. Chen Zhao thought about it. Find 2 bodyguards for Fei Lai? But Fei Lai definitely wouldn't accept it. Then he'd protect her secretly. After hanging up with Amira, Chen Zhao called Klaus. Klaus, do you know any powerful bodyguards? President, I know quite a few people, but they're definitely not good enough for you, Klaus said with a bitter smile. I want to prepare 2 bodyguards for Fei Lai to protect her secretly, Chen Zhao said. Oh, I see. I do have their numbers. How about I give you their numbers? Sure. Give me their numbers. Klaus sent the numbers to Chen Zhao. After getting the numbers, Chen Zhao contacted the person. After saying Klaus's name, the person agreed to meet easily. The person wasn't in L.A. right now, but they'd rush over immediately. They should be able to reach L.A. tomorrow. Actually, even without bodyguards, Fei Lai might not be in danger. First of all, she definitely wouldn't be in danger at home. Second, Walter would follow Fei Lai every day. Moreover, Fei Lai's skills were quite good. Her body was already much stronger than normal people. She would also occasionally practice boxing with Chen Zhao. Of course, Chen Zhao wanted to be careful. There was nothing wrong with being careful. Chen Zhao thought about it and called Basin over. Basin was also a strong bodyguard. Besides Samuel, he was the smallest one in the bodyguard team. Even if he followed Fei Lai every day, he wouldn't attract attention. Chapter 1855. The next day, Chen Zhao arrived at the appointed restaurant. There were quite a lot of people in the restaurant, but there was only one table. The customers were all in suits and ties. There were both men and women. Hello, Chen Zhao asked first. Did Klaus introduce you? You're Mr. Chen, right? The leading man was in his 40s. We're from Blade Security Company. I'm Glavers, the person in charge of the company. They're all members of our team. How much do you charge? Chen Zhao asked. Mr. Chen, Glavers asked. Do you want long-term employment or short-term service? Chen Zhao thought for a moment and asked, what's the long-term fee? What's the short-term fee? The short-term fee is based on the number of days. 10,000 per person per day. The shortest is 7 days. Long-term, at least half a year, 120,000 per month. Then long-term. It seems more cost-effective, Chen Zhao said. I want 2 female bodyguards. It's best if my wife doesn't know. You just have to protect her secretly and don't disturb her work. So what does your wife do? Coastal Rescue Team. Don't disturb her when she's working. But if someone suspicious approaches her, you have to take action. Glavers nodded. No problem. Let's sign for half a year first. If I'm satisfied with your service, I'll sign a longer contract, Chen Zhao said. Here's a check for 1.5 million. Glavers was also quite satisfied with Chen Zhao's client. He didn't haggle at all, and accepted the price he offered very straightforwardly. A regular security guard's monthly salary wasn't even 10,000. His offer was sky-high, but Chen Zhao didn't even blink. Mr. Chen, do you need security services? Me? Forget it. I don't need it. Chen Zhao smiled and shook his head. Fine. By the way, are you close to Klaus? When Klaus was in the army, I was his instructor, Graves replied. Chen Zhao felt that anyone who could be an instructor in the army was really strong. For example, Gaia's combat skills were top-notch. Glavers thought that Klaus was Chen Zhao's bodyguard. He knew Klaus's skills, so he didn't force him to introduce bodyguards. She's Avia and she's Zoya. They're not any weaker than any of the men in our company. Glavers pointed at the 2 women in suits. Chen Zhao reached out. Avia, Zoya, hello. Hello, boss. The 2 girls shook hands with Chen Zhao. From today onwards, you 2 will listen to Mr. Chen's instructions. Yes, Mr. Graves. Mr. Chen, if there's nothing else, we'll be leaving first. Talk to Avia and Zoya. Gravis led the others away. Chen Zhao gestured for them to sit down. This is my wife's message. Take a look. You better not let her know of your existence. Just protect her in secret. Unless it's necessary, don't show yourself. Boss, if your wife works for the Coastal Rescue Team, she shouldn't be in any danger during the day. At least, she won't be attacked directly. The main problem is when she's on her way to and from work, Avia said. Can you install a tracker on your wife? Yes. Chen Zhao nodded. If you think it's necessary, then do it. How you do it will depend on your abilities. I won't do it myself. Of course. It's our job. Frank was depressed because he'd been in charge of feeding Raymond for the past 2 days. After 2 days of contact, Frank wasn't afraid of Raymond anymore. But Raymond was really vengeful. He would tease him every time he came. For example, yesterday, Frank drove a truck to deliver 2 live cows. He led the cows to the top of the mountain. Before he could rest, a 6-meter-long crocodile appeared. Frank was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He fired a few shots, but didn't kill the crocodile. Instead, it became even more ferocious. Just as Frank was about to turn and run, Raymond appeared and bit the scary crocodile to death. After that, Frank realized that Raymond had driven the crocodile here. Frank was furious, but he couldn't do anything. Who asked him to offend Raymond? There are crocodiles. Why do they have to eat beef? Frank complained as he led the 2 cows up the mountain. Moo! Just then, the 2 cows that were being led suddenly became restless. Frank let go of the reins and Raymond appeared. He bit one of the cows with his bloody mouth. The cow weighing more than 1,000 kilograms was bitten by Raymond. No matter how many times Frank saw it, he was still shocked. Raymond's way of eating was too violent. The other cow wanted to run, but Raymond swept his tail and knocked it out. Raymond, today's food is here, Frank called. I'm leaving. Frank wasn't interested in watching Raymond eat. Just then, a few voices came from the mountain path. Before Frank could make a sound, Raymond picked him up and slipped into the bushes like a wisp of smoke. The man and Snake hid in the bushes and watched the people coming from the mountain path. They were just kids. They had probably just entered high school. Frank felt Raymond's tail loosen. Then Raymond whipped Frank's butt. Frank stumbled and fell out of the bushes. Ah! The kids were startled when they saw Frank suddenly come out of the bushes. What are you doing here? This is private property. Frank yelled and touched his buttocks. You think it's private property? Look at how sneaky you are. You don't look like a good person. I'll call the police. A girl pointed at Frank. She wasn't afraid of the burly Frank at all. Frank's face turned red. What do you mean I don't look like a good person? I'm doing this for your own good. These children were obviously here to sightsee. They didn't know where they heard that there was a lake on the mountain, so they came here. Call the police? Okay, call the police. Frank suddenly thought that if the police came and found out what Raymond said, it would be troublesome. Don't mind him. Look, there really is a lake. The lake here is so beautiful. The group of kids rushed towards the lake. But after a few steps, they saw the corpse of a crocodile. Ah, crocodile, crocodile. Frank slowly walked over. There are crocodiles here. If you don't want to feed them, get lost. The children immediately hesitated. They were indeed frightened by the crocodiles, but they didn't want to leave. Chapter 1856. Frank crossed his arms over his chest and looked at the group of brats with a smile. The leader gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go. This is a mountain, and the crocodiles can't come up here. Most likely, someone put a crocodile here. Since it's dead, there must be no more crocodiles." The kid's guess was reasonable. Normally, crocodiles wouldn't live at high altitudes. There was a water source, and there wasn't much food. Crocodiles appearing here could only be released on purpose. But limited by food, even if a few crocodiles were released, very few could survive. Frank sneered. There are a lot of crocodiles here. We won't believe you. You're scaring us on purpose. Yeah, why should we believe you? The kids felt that Frank was scaring them on purpose. Since you want to die, I can only call the police, Frank said. There really were a lot of crocodiles here. Frank wanted to see them embarrass themselves. But it was a matter of life and death. If he couldn't persuade them, he could only call the police. Hearing Frank's words, the kids were even more certain of their guess. Let's go. Ignore him. The kids excitedly ran to the lake. The kids were wearing swimsuits under their jackets. They took off their jackets and jumped into the water. Frank was anxious. He ran to the lake and dialed the police's number. This wasn't a joke. If something happened here and someone died, especially a group of minors, not only would he be in trouble, But even Steven would be in trouble. Damn, there's no signal here. I should get a satellite phone. Frank was a bit angry. Hurry up, there really are crocodiles here, Frank said anxiously. But the kids were having fun. They didn't care about Frank's advice at all. The water quality here is so good. Yeah, it's so comfortable. It was a beautiful place with verdant hills and clear waters. It was a paradise. Of course, the water quality was good. If a creature lived here for a long time, it might develop intelligence. Don't swim any deeper. Come back quickly. Frank saw the group of children swimming deeper into the water. They didn't care about his warning at all. Frank became even more anxious. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from the lake. Crocodile! Crocodile! A girl screamed. The scariest thing was that the crocodiles that appeared happened to be swimming in the direction they were heading. It directly blocked their way. Oh no! Frank became more and more anxious. He took out his gun and aimed at the crocodiles. However, the caliber and power of the pistol in his hand were very small. After all, it was impossible for him to carry a powerful weapon. Saltwater crocodiles were known for their thick skin and thick flesh. Small caliber pistols can hardly inflict fatal damage on them. The water also weakened the impact of the bullet's trajectory. It was harder for Frank's gun to do damage to them. Unless, of course, he could hit their exposed heads. However, this was extremely difficult. Frank tried to fire, but the bullet hit the water and missed. Frank fired again, and a crocodile sank. However, the bullet did not hit the crocodile's head, but its body. At this time, another group of crocodiles surrounded the children from another direction. Frank's face was pale. He was at a loss. He could almost foresee that once the two groups of crocodiles surrounded the children, it would be a bloody feast of slaughter. At this moment, the grass moved, followed by a splashing sound. Raymond! Raymond is here! Frank saw Raymond's body slide into the lake. Then the lake began to churn. A crocodile floated to the surface with its belly up. Frank gulped. Then a second crocodile, a third. Quick, here! Swim this way! Frank shouted. The children also saw the dead crocodiles. They didn't have time to think about why the crocodiles suddenly died. However, they still swam in this direction. They weren't too far from the shore. Soon they swam past the dead crocodiles. Frank helped them to the shore one by one. The children were all terrified. The lake was still churning. The crocodiles floated to the surface with their bellies up. By now they had calmed down. Their faces were full of doubt. Something in the water is killing those crocodiles. Yeah. The children looked at Frank. He must be in the know. He knows what's in the water. Soon, there were more than a dozen crocodiles' bodies on the surface. A crocodile's body was washed to the shore. Don't go over, Frank ordered. That crocodile might not be completely dead. However, these children were extremely daring. They ignored Frank's obstruction and went to flip the crocodile's body. The 4-meter-long crocodile needed the children to work together to flip it over. They found that the crocodile's neck had been bitten by something. Obviously, this thing was huge. At least its mouth could directly bite the crocodile's neck. And it was very powerful. This 4-meter-long crocodile's skin could almost block small-caliber bullets. But it was bitten to a bloody pulp. The crocodile's neck was completely broken. And that thing's purpose wasn't to eat, but to kill. Sir, what's in the water? Frank looked at the children. After hesitating for a while, he finally said in a low voice, Don't you know? There's a legend about the monster in this water. In the past 10 years, more than a dozen people disappeared here. Later, a rich man bought this forest and wanted to build a manor here. As a result, several people died as soon as the project started. The rich man had no choice but to raise crocodiles here, hoping to use them to kill the monster in the water. As a result, the number of crocodiles increased, and that thing began to eat crocodiles. The children shivered. Frank continued, You're lucky. At least that thing prefers the taste of crocodiles, not you. What about you? Who are you? I'm hired by the owner of this forest to guard this area and make sure that no one comes here to take risks. Did you see the truck parked at the foot of the mountain? The children nodded. Frank pretended to be mysterious. It's used to transport cattle and sheep. It's specially used to feed that thing. in case it's hungry and attacks people who come here by mistake. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.